Hey guys, and welcome to the Indie Game Culture Podcast, a podcast about indie games. You know it, I know it, we all know it. We are talking about indie games today. I am here with JT, and we are joined by Monica this time, as Malika is coming down with a cold. So thoughts and prayers with Malika.
Yeah, you had to sub out the other indie game culture woman whose name starts with M and ends with A.
Yeah, we've got a few of those in the back burner, so we thought we'll bring another one along. Just a little bit of admin before we kick on and do our usual stuff. Did you know we have a website? I'm sure you know, but I'll tell you again anyway. It's called the Indie Game Culture website, indiegameculture.com. We do news, we do reviews, we do everything you would expect to be on there. We also have socials. We have Facebook, Twitter, TikTok, you name it, we have it. We also have a Discord where you can come and chat to us and tell us all the lovely things you want to tell us about games. And as well as that, we have another podcast, the Indie Game Culture News Blast, where we round up the news for the past week or two, depending on how busy the news schedule has been. And that is all I need to tell you. Go and join the things. But just before we get into the usual, how is everyone?
Well, I'm doing really well. I just got back from TwitchCon the other day, which is a lot of fun. It was hosted in Vegas, and it's a big convention centered around Twitch, basically. So there's a lot of streamers, a few developers, and like a lot of software people showing off what they have, and it was a lot of fun. I met a bunch of people. I met a few other VTubers, and I talked to a few developers about their games. So that's always fun. And I got a bunch of free merchandise, but it's always like a bunch of buttons and stickers that I feel like I never use. I never know where to put, so it sits in my bag. So we'll see. But it was a really good time. Yeah.
Did you meet anyone truly interesting?
I talked to a few of the developers for Jackbox, and they're pretty cool. They're very open to talk about their game and everything. Scheduled an interview for later next week, so we'll be talking then. But overall, it was fairly cool. I remember I met a guy that was a Twitch partner that played piano, and he said he'd play any song if you give him a follow, and I followed, and he played a Dirt Moth from Hollow Knight, and it was really nice. I was like, yes, that was worth it.
That's very cool.
Yeah.
What about you, Monica?
Appropriate you talked about the Jackbox devs because I just finished my review for that game.
Oh, excellent.
Yeah, for Jackbox 10. I've been mostly just playing way too many video games because there's been 8 different things that I've wanted to play during mid to late October, and they need to stop making video games at this point right now. There's too many.
For sure. Just to let you guys in behind the curtain, every time there's a review code that rolls in, I'm like, I could give this to Monica, but I'm really putting a lot on her plate. And she's always like, do you know what? I'll have another one. Give me another one. So an absolute workhorse.
It's like I played Jackbox 10 and in the first 2 days, I think I played 10 hours of that game. And it was weird because I just hopped on several different Discord servers for sessions, and it's right after that, I've not touched it since. I was just so tired of playing Jackbox. He's like, you play that game for 2 hours at a time, and with a week-long break usually.
It's a tough one to review because that's your whole social battery, one session, and that's you just drain. But you have to do that 5 or 6 times over.
In terms of not reviewing it, just playing it, I've gotten way too into Risk of Rain 2.
Okay.
Don't know why. I just picked it up and I was like, man, I'm going to play this game for 70 hours. This is way too good.
Also, I'm curious for the Jackbox one. Did you have a preset group to play with, some friends that you'd known, or did you just have to play with random people the whole time?
I didn't. I kind of just jumped into different servers with people I mostly knew.
Okay.
Or vaguely knew at least, but it was mostly just friends. Yeah.
All right. I feel like that can really shape the experience. Just
yeah.
Well, awesome. Myself, I have been away. I went on holiday. I do take those occasionally. I went to Budapest, and it was very, very nice. I don't holiday in a very extravagant way. I literally went across, had a couple of dinners, bought a new skateboard. that was literally the height of what I did. But Budapest is a really nice place. It's incredibly clean. That's the one thing I took away from it. There was no litter on the streets at all, and it was really you expect to see so much in the ground. You really notice when it's not there. You're like, whoa, It's almost alien to me. So that was nice, and they're a quite laid back people. So I really enjoyed that. I would also say it's one of those cities, if you are like big into your travel, you go there once, you do it, and you probably wouldn't go back again. You can definitely do it in one visit for sure. And I'm always looking for places where I can like constantly return. I've been to Amsterdam like 6 times because I really like it there. So that's not going to be a place I return to, but it was very, very nice. And in between, I have been playing quite a few games, and I think we should probably talk about those right now. So we'll go into our first section, which is indie games that we have been playing. Who wants to kick me off?
Well, I've been playing actually quite a few games lately. I've been playing a lot of Lords of the Fallen, which just came out, and it's my feelings on it are really mixed. Basically, it's a very Dark Souls game, and like where Lies of P just came out, and that was more like Dark Souls, but also more themed around Pinocchio, and like delved more into Bloodborne and Sekiro. Lords of the Fallen felt very much more like Dark Souls 3, except it had a fun little gimmick where you have a thing called the Lantern, and using it, you can transfer into a different world that's like the afterlife, and you also get set there when you die, so it functions as like a second life system. And I ended up I really liked and really hated a lot of the game. Like it was some of the like the combat, the RPG stuff, some of the boss design was phenomenal, but it's the same elements where a lot of the game can get very frustrating around certain like platforming obstacles, or the game had really poorly implemented multiplayer where I could only connect with I think 3 people over the 30 or 40 times I tried to connect, so that was really
Mhm.
upsetting. Also, the game is not very well optimized, so if you don't have like the newest PC, it's gonna run kind of poorly in some sections.
Mhm.
But it was really engaging and fun for some of the fights. Like the pairing was phenomenal, and I'd always just go end up like choosing a strength build in most Souls games, and ended up working really well, like always. So that was good. But oh gosh, I'm still so
That's,
split.
that's definitely the way to go. Just bludgeon everything that comes near you,
Pretty
and then
much.
think about it later. But I had heard just I've not really engaged with Lords of the Fallen at all. I've just seen the review scores and not really took much interest. But the thing that popped up every time was that it's like obnoxiously hard for the sake of being hard, rather than to give like a fair challenge.
I I'm not sure for some parts. I mean, I will say for some of the bosses, like it's actually very easy to parry for some of them. Like if you have the right equipment. In Liza P, it felt like it actually felt more unfair for parrying. It felt like I thought I knew what I was doing, but sometimes it's just guesswork. In this game, at least, you don't always have to parry. There's ways around a situation, but some of the like just the fighting the regular enemies just felt way too hard in some sections. But you can just run past everything, so it's kind of fine.
The one thing that I seen in like the preview leading up to the game being released is that the lanterns or the checkpoints or campfires, whatever you want to call them, I
Yeah.
don't know what they are in the game. You only get one, and you kind of carry it with you. Is that the case?
Not exactly. There's plenty of preset ones. It's more that you can choose where you want to put yours, and it's really frustrating when you only have a couple, but it's also great where it's like, okay, I get right to a boss door, and instead of running all the way back from my previous save point, which is like 2 minutes ago, I can just put down a little bonfire thing
Oh, so
here.
you can literally just put it down anywhere you like in the map.
Not anywhere. There's just a few. Actually, there's plenty of preset locations with these just like flower beds, and you can put it
Oh,
down.
okay.
Generally, they get a lot more ideal later on. In the beginning, they're pretty sparse, and it's you're kind of questioning like, well, I want to put one down here. Let me do that game, but it gets a little bit more forgiving for that later, and then you get to really appreciate that. And it's like it's kind of a risk and reward. And I gotta figure out where it is, but I really hate it in some areas because there's a lot of red herrings where you finished a tough section and you just like, okay, I don't want to do that again. So you find a flower bed, you put it down, and then you come across one of the preset bonfires, and it's like, well, what the heck, game? That was that was for nothing, and the game is just kind of like pulling a prank on you. It's like, oh, we tricked you, and that just felt really mean. And okay, there was besides that, I have one other major critique that it really feels like okay the game is being mean for its sake, where there's a few items you can collect that you have no way of knowing, but if you collect it, a giant worm will come out of the ground and eat you and probably kill you if you don't have enough health, even if you're in the other real world. So and it like transports you to the other world and kills you, and there is no way of knowing that, and I lost a lot of the Dark Souls or runes in this. No, I forgot what the currency is, but I died plenty of times from that, and I got so frustrated. I just kind of screamed at the game. It's like, how could I have known that? So that was strange, but overall, if you like Dark Souls games, if you especially like Dark Souls 3, you'll probably really like it, but it's going to be very hard in a couple of brief sections. So
Every time there's like Soulsborne discussion, I'm like, wow, that's interesting because I've never played the games.
it's very
It's
Yeah,
like my
definitely get
girlfriend's
like
really into them, and she's tried to get me into them, and then I'm like, no, thank you, no, this is not what I want.
it's very much an acquired taste, and I dip my toe into them, and I will play them kind of a lot slower and a lot more methodically than the basic Souls player will. Whereas JT will jump into them and be great at them from the offset and throughout. So I
Maybe I should
struggle
tell her
through.
about that game then. Yeah.
I'm still so surprised how fast I got through Lies of P and that. I've just talked to other friends and they've spent like tens of hours and they're still in the beginning areas, and I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. That's actually not that hard.
And the thing was, it was before the patch that made it even easier
Yeah.
that you did all this. It's very,
Oh,
very
gosh.
impressive.
Thanks.
But
Oh my gosh, it's so hard. In the later parts of the game, it's like it's brutal.
so, considering Lords of the Fallen to Remnant and Lies of P and all the other kind of not Soulsborne Souls that have came out, would you say it's good or
Um,
lacking?
I would say it's pretty good. Again, if you can get past the frustrations, and if they eventually fix multiplayer, I'll say that it's on par and even better in some qualities of the games, at least in the RPG building, because there's a lot of different ways you can build the character, and you can make very fun characters, and it's like very well optimized for like you can make big throwing builds, or you can parry enemies. You can do a lot of stuff with it, but as it is now, it needs a lot of fixing and optimization before it can get to that point. So it's probably going to be a bit. I would say wait for like 2 or 3 patches and then maybe try it out if you're interested. But as it is now, I can almost recommend it. If you really like Dark Souls games, then you'll probably like it. But if not, you're gonna get very, very frustrated.
There you go. It's the basic gaming staple. Wait until they fix it.
I've
Yeah.
also been playing plenty of other games too. I just finished reviewing a Wizard with a Gun recently, and I actually ended up really liking it. I got more into the gameplay, and what it was a roguelike, but it's like an open world roguelike where you have 5 minutes to explore a world before the apocalypse happens and the world starts being destroyed. And it's a 2D like isometric kind of roguelike like a Cult of the Lamb. It almost looked like visually identical to that, and it was fairly easy. That my biggest thing with it is I don't know if that was a good or bad thing because I breezed through most of the bosses, and it's very same mechanics. Like you can dodge away from most attacks, and it's like a wizard mechanic, but you have guns, so you can like make elemental bullets for your guns, and they're actually very customizable. But unfortunately, I discovered the best way to break the game is there's a bullet called a lightning bullet that has a long cooldown, but it deals like I think like 2,000% of your damage or 3,000%. It one shots most enemies, and you can equip it on every gun, and you have 7 guns, and you can basically put 2 bullets on each gun, so you can have 14 of the bullets, and that ended up making every boss and enemy a piece of cake. But so the game, like the gameplay, just kind of became a joke for me at that point. But the world was so well built, and just it felt fun to be able to just explore it and like go through it with a friend. So it was really good.
And it obviously,
In some
whenever
parts.
we were getting the review codes for it, it came with a second code. So they obviously put a lot of stock into the multiplayer aspect
Yeah.
of it. Like, how important is it?
I would say it's really good. You can still play through it alone, and it's fairly easy to finish alone. But you and your friend are probably going to discover more things. The game, like I mentioned, the bullets, but there's, I think about 16, probably more than 16 types of bullets that you can combine with friends, and there's like different elemental reactions. And I was playing with my friend Zochi, and she discovered that you could charm animals and dogs, or they have these like robot dogs that you can charm, and like we had it following us around for the whole playthrough until it died, and we just had like a lot of fun shenanigans, and it's a lot easier to build in the main base if you get into that. Um, I would say you're gonna have a better time with friends for almost every type of game that goes like that, but so it's fine single player. if you can find some friends to play through for it, you'll have a very good time. But it is very short and it gets a little bit repetitive later on. But I appreciate that it's not as repetitive as Cult of the Lamb, and it doesn't take as long. And because the runs are only 5 minutes, you don't feel as disappointed when you lose all of your stuff or if you die. I only died like 2 times, but it's
So it's kind of like a open world bite-sized like Enter the Gungeon pretty much, but
yeah,
with like
I
a
would
bit
say
more stuff to it.
Enter the Gungeon, but a lot easier
Yeah.
and very themed around cowboys, and like you're hearing Western music the whole time, and everyone's has almost like a fetishistic like love of the Wild West. So it's
I've I've never finished a Gungeon run, so that sounds like the perfect game for me.
yeah, I very much recommend it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Besides that, I ended up playing Cocoon after Callum and Malika recommended it, and I've really liked it.
True.
Think I'm almost about to finish it. I got to the bit with the like the game basically turns into like a shooter in some areas where like you have to shoot a
Yeah.
thing in a certain area, and I just ended up being very bad at that. And it's like, oh, this is gonna get really frustrating.
It's very out of place with the rest of the boss mechanics because it's technically a boss, but it just feels like a really
Like-
footery thing.
I just remember putting that in my boss's guide, and I was like, this isn't really a boss, is it? This is just like a weird set piece. And then the game had it on the like completion percent as a boss. I'm like, you sure about that?
Yeah, it just felt like a weird gimmick, but yeah, it's an awesome puzzle. How did you find like the overall difficulty of the game throughout? Because I thought it was like so easy until a point, and then it got pretty hard all of a sudden.
I felt like it was very approachable. There were only 2 puzzles. There's one at the beginning where I just wasn't thinking about the puzzle the right way, and then once I saw the solution, it made sense for all the other puzzles. It was like you had to recognize a certain like hieroglyph, and I just was not looking around for it. And I saw it, I was like, oh, it's that thing. Like at first I thought it was like you had to play it in like this from the sound of the music, and I was like, I've just approaching it the wrong way. But except for
Oh
that,
yeah,
yeah.
the one with an ancestor.
Actually, it's the one at the very beginning. I was
Oh, that one. Yeah. No, that's just the patterns.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's just shapes.
So I just didn't understand what that was. But eventually, like most of the puzzles, you'll get stumped for a bit, and then you'll figure it out, and like you will have that aha moment, and it'll make you feel very good. And I haven't finished it, so I have no idea what the story's about. I did see a bit, like a glimpse of a giant, like I think war machine or war factory, and I thought like, okay, is this about like a space invasion maybe? And I was was still confused.
Just say, don't worry, you won't know what the story is by the end either.
I was literally about to say the same thing. There's no story to be had there.
Oh darn it!
I mean, it's like there's a story. I just don't know what it is.
No,
I
I
don't know what
got
any
to
of
the
that
end.
means.
Oh, I thought
It
there
was
was
kind of like, is this like the Big Bang kind of creation of the universe thing? I think that's what I kind of landed on. But there's so many ways you could interpret it, and they could all
Okay.
be wrong.
Yeah,
Oh.
I do love that game though. That was like the most like genuinely like out loud saying that is so genuinely so cool like feeling I've ever had since I played Portal 2 for the first time, and it's
Yeah.
wild.
It's definitely one of those puzzle games that feels clever in the way that it's put together, and it's not just borrowing off something else, which
Right.
usually is the case with puzzle games, or it's not just a gimmick that they've milked dry for about 5 hours and it feels awful by the end, like Viewfinder, for example, which was
Game's just,
a 10-minute like tech demo stretched out to 5 hours.
Cocoon's just the perfect length for what it is. It's really good.
Yeah, no, I've been having a really good time with it. I love the visuals. Everything looks so cool. How it's like alive and kind of fascinating and disgusting at the same time. It's like I'm both like, I don't know, just so amazed and slightly nauseous looking at it every new area.
Yeah.
But yeah, God, I need to finish that. I'll get to that later. But I've been split between that and a few other games. And I thought I've been playing more. Well,
Now,
oh right,
before you progress,
Yeah.
I'm just going to ask you: is there any more Sea of Stars?
a little bit. But I know that once I do that, I'm going to spend the whole day playing it. So like I'm trying to have some self-restraint because I know once I promise I'm gonna play through all of that, I'm gonna start raving about it. But I just know that once I get into that hole, it's gonna be very hard to come out of it. So I need to make sure I have everything else taken care of before.
Jump in head first, get in that hole. a nice hole.
I have not started getting in the hole yet. I just heard it's really good.
Yeah,
It's so
look,
good.
if you don't know, I gave it a 10 out of 10. I don't do that. I'm a curmudgeon. I hate things. I loved it.
Isn't it like similar to Chrono Trigger?
Very,
Kind of?
very much inspired by Chrono Trigger,
Yeah.
yes.
I should probably try it then because I do enjoy Chrono Trigger a lot.
Yeah, it's even the guy that done the soundtrack for Chrono Trigger, he done a couple of tracks for this one, so it's
Oh,
yeah.
Nice.
that's very cool. Besides that, I do want to mention Baldur's Gate 3 for a bit because I I was invited to play with the group and we had some fun moments where I don't know, we practiced the art of barrelmancy where we were struggling with this late game boss and then we took a bunch of barrels in our inventory and just like put them around the boss and exploded it. And so that was very fun. There were so many creative solutions to that game, or like I started speaking with the dead and talking to animals, and I was like, this is hilarious. I love this.
Yeah, the combat's very much Divinity Original Sin 2, but turned up to 11. Like there's even
Yeah.
more you can do.
It's so creative. Like all of that. I love the investigation elements too, and just how we go through the game. It's just one of our friends just ends up stealing from everybody and usually gets us into situations like I was talking to the owlbear and then she tried to steal from the owlbear and she triggered the fight and it killed all of us. And I was like, Sylvia,
Yeah.
what the heck?
Yeah,
But
I was kind of in the same boat because I've been playing with Ella and I haven't really done my own solo ones. I've just been playing with her, which means I'm still in Act 1. So
oh,
what can you do?
yeah,
But that kind of happened the same thing to me with the oil bear. And I heard from someone else that if you don't kill the oil bear, it comes to your camp later. And I'm like, oh,
yeah.
I would have really liked that.
And then you get to like adopt one of the pups and it stays as a
Yeah.
companion and it's like, oh, well, I wanted that. But yeah, it's been good. Oh, there's a bit where it's kind of minor spoiler, but I do kind of want to say it. Asterion. There's like you find out later he's a vampire, and I he's like, hey, can I drink some of your blood? And I just let him, and then he murdered me, and we were all watching, and it was like, JT, what the heck? You're supposed to refuse him. But I was like, well, he seemed very like genuine, and so we were all laughing. I was too polite to refuse a vampire, so that was a good time.
That's very good.
I love confronting
Very
him.
convincing vampire.
I ended up confronting him in the morning, and I was like, "What the heck? You killed me!" And he was like, "Oh, sorry about that." And then we just moved on from that. I was like, "What?"
It does
didn't-
track with your character, JT. Too nice for your own good to the point that you let things kill you.
It's I'm glad that there's a mechanic for reviving your character because that's been happening a bit.
Yeah, it has been absolute gold dust for sure. It's handy to have. But we're talking about triple A's, and you're not allowed
Yeah.
to do that.
All right, yeah, just a brief bit of Baldur's Gate 3, but and last game I played was a game called Labyrinthine or Labyrinthine. I have to know if I'm saying right because there's a couple of different games with that same name, but basically it's a horror game you play with friends where you're trapped in a maze and you try to navigate the maze through a system of puzzles, and the biggest mechanic of the game is that you have a bunch of glow sticks. And you can use that to like create paths, and it's like, okay, I've been here before. And the maze actually has a lot of tricks. Like at some parts of the maze, a wall will come up and separate you and your friends, or there's plenty of monsters around, so you have to navigate them. And it ended up being okay. Some I like really loved and really hated these parts, a bit like Lords of the Fallen, where the game would have me like, oh, I reach a really like clever bit where like it'd separate us and we have to figure out how to go through puzzles on our own, or we'd all do a different puzzle and progress like fairly quickly through the game. There's a bit towards the end where the game gives you a certain amount of lives, and if you run out, then it's game over until you get to the next area. And we came down to our last life, and then we got through into the next area, and it was a very tense moment, and we were really frustrated with that area. Like we'd been there for 2 hours, and we were just very done with the catacombs and being chased by these very dumb monsters. But we figured it out, we got through, and that felt very good. But it's one of those games where I'm writing an article on best horror games to play with friends, and this is a game where I would hate to play it on my own because it's so long. All the puzzles feel very artificial, and it's easy to figure out, but it just takes time. And having to play it on your own would just feel very boring. With friends, at least you get into some shenanigans, so it's fun. But yeah, I think there's definitely a lot of those kind of games where it's like I could see the appeal with friends, but without, there really is no point. You'll get very bored.
There's some of those, like the one you spoke about a while ago, Enter the Backrooms. It's another one of those where, like, if you weren't with other people and in the situation, it would feel like really vacuous, and you're just that one person doing these really arbitrary things. But whenever
Yeah,
you're doing it with other people, you're laughing at them as they feel. It
right.
makes it a little better.
And it's great because those games will have certain features like into the back rooms. If you like lean your character back, it looks like they're doing the limbo as they walk or run, or same thing as you're walking forward. And even this game, if you get revived a certain way, your character, their default walking animation will be them crawling, and it's really funny. But it's obviously a bug, but it's like a bug you don't want to fix because it just looks too good.
Yeah, it gives me real Gary's mod vibes. That.
Yes. Yeah, that's
But
been mine.
yeah, cool. Monica, do you want to jump in?
So the main thing I've been playing like super recently is Laika Aged Through Blood, and man, I feel like I have the most controversial like bad opinion on this game, and I don't know how to fix that. It's just like it's so beautiful. It's like the visuals are incredible, the music is incredible, the story is incredible, and then the gameplay makes me want to tear my hair out and slam my head against the wall. I hate it so much. It's like they ask you to do like 8 things at once because you have to like essentially play on a motorbike in a Metroidvania and also shoot and aim a gun in omnidirectional, like at all times for 100% of the gameplay. And there's a ton of different weapons and things that you can choose, and a bunch of different options and enemies that take different approaches. And it's just like it gets super overwhelming. And maybe I just can't handle that many things at once. But it's like it, and also they just make you like it's a game where you're supposed to die a lot. It's like Celeste in that way, but it has Hollow Knight's system of giving you your money back, and that just sounds terrible.
Whenever I first seen it, I thought to myself, "Oh, it's going to be like a Metroidvania," but I'd imagined that they were going to really boil down the Metroidvania combat side and just make it more like a 2D kind of Trials Fusion, where it was more about the platforming. And just from the sounds of it, they have not done that at all.
I mean, the enemies aren't even like that complex. It's just like they'll just shoot at you or use a different gun that shoots a different way. It's pretty. It's kind of boiled down in that way. It's more Metroid than Vania, but it's just a little too much to keep track of. And also the insanely like overdone blood effects can like genuinely obscure the bullets at times. And then for some reason, after you kill an enemy, they still have a hitbox. So if you kill an enemy and their corpse moves in front of a different enemy, you can't shoot that enemy now. I don't know why. It just feels like they weren't willing to compromise on the visuals or anything or their cool concept at all. And they ended up making a game that was inherently very frustrating. And then I looked on the internet and everyone's giving it a 9 out of 10 or a 10 out of 10. I'm like, what do y'all see in this? Did you play it? Or did you just watch someone play it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I looked at the trailer and like the pre-existing like stuff before it released, and I was like, that looks so cool. I need to give that a go. But hearing this, I'm like, oh, it's just very much one of those viral games that's great, but not if you're actually in the seat playing it.
If you can manage like a bunch of different things in your brain at the same time, and you think like motorbike, like gameplay, like motocross gameplay mixed with having to shoot and aim at all times is like good, then you'll probably like it. But man, I don't know. It just feels like they weren't willing to make a few more like enhancements to the gameplay by compromising the visuals a little bit.
Yeah, well, it was one of those that definitely had promise. We gave it our best.
It's still like, don't get me wrong, it's still like a 7 or 8. I just don't think it's a perfect game. It's very, very difficult.
Well, we allow controversial views here, so it's fine.
We love controversial views.
We do, especially if we can clip them.
Aside from that, mostly again Jackbox, which I played for way too long for what is Jackbox, but also Risk of Rain 2. I played a lot of that mostly with friends, and The upsetting thing is that I usually end up folding to the final boss, Mithrix, and dying instantly in that fight. And then, for some reason, as like a joke, I decided to play the worst character in the game. And the game ended up taking pity on me, giving me all the best items, and I beat him on my first try. And I just don't like how that works out sometimes.
I mean, you got to take your luck when it comes.
Yeah, it's just, I just wish it came with a character I liked, you know?
That's fair. I always get that one mixed up, Risk of Rain, with what is it? I think it's the Swapper, and I think it's just because the original art looks very, very similar, like the two box arts, and I'm like, is that or is that the other thing? And they're completely different games.
Yeah. Risk of Rain 2 is the insanely good one.
Yeah.
That's now owned by Gearbox, so we'll get no new content.
No, definitely not. Gearbox are in a bad old way.
Yeah.
I seen no, it was a good while ago now, but I forget the guy's name. The guy that runs Gearbox, basically, he was doing a charity auction selling his like weird Hawaiian shirts, and apparently it didn't go all to plan, and people were ending up getting them for like a couple of dollars. I find that quite funny.
Yeah. Aside from that, though, I played Core Keeper on stream. That was fun, mostly because I hadn't played that much at all before.
Yeah, I remember tuning into that. That was fun.
Yeah. I did what has to be like my 100th Terraria run at this point, but it was different this time, guys, I swear. It was with a thing called Archipelago, which is essentially like a randomizer for several different games that you can play in multiplayer. So like I could like have Terraria randomized and Hollow Knight randomized, and then I could have my friends like Mothwing Cloak be behind the Eye of Cthulhu in Terraria. And that is insanely fun. I absolutely recommend that to anyone who has like a group of friends who play games on their PC. It is very, very fun. Aside from that, I'll give one sentence to AAA's. I played Mario and Sonic, and they were both good.
That's concise. That's really good. So succinct. But yeah, I can actually jump in for a little bit on Core Keeper because I also happened to play the first like 3 or 4 hours of that. I didn't mean to. I just wanted to. I actually brought it up because my wife thought she was in the credits because she worked on it from a third party. So she thought, "Is my name in that?" And I had it there. So I looked. When I looked in the credits, she was like, "Oh, I'm not in it because it's the company's name, not her name." So sad. But then I had it on the screen, and I was like, I could maybe try this for like half an hour and see how it goes. And then 4 or 5 hours went past, and I'd beaten the boss and moved on to the second one and made so many tunnels. It's a very fun game.
I think that's exactly how my stream went.
Yeah, it's one of those where you just get so involved in the different systems, and they're done in such a way where like one blends into and bleeds into the other, bleeds into the next, and all of a sudden you're like, well, I can't stop now because if I get this, then I can do this, and then I can build this. Yeah, you just stop.
I don't understand how it took me so long to get to that, considering I love Stardew Valley and Terraria, and that just seems like a kind of weird mix of both of those with a bit of extra thrown in.
It's literally a perfect blend of the two, for sure.
I don't know how it took me that long to try it.
Yeah, I just remember hopping to a friend's world, and them and another group of friends had effectively like colonized like almost like the middle area of the world, and it was just kind of amazing to see like how much work they'd made, and like they're still going. So it was a very cool feeling. I still have yet to play that on my own though, so I'm kind of intimidated just knowing like what lies ahead of me. Like, oh, it's gonna be a lot.
It's very much it's like a slow burn in the first hour because you're like just making tunnels consistently. But once you've got a little base to build upon, then it really starts to pick up pace. Yeah. It's really good. It's really taken away because I was going to dedicate time to Moonstone Island because I played like the first hour and a half of that, and I was like, I'm going to go back to it. And it completely derailed me. That's not happened.
Yeah.
Because they're so similar. I'm like, if I dedicate time to that one, I'm not playing that one. I've only got one. I've only got room for like one farming simulator type game at a time. So
right. Also, the Moonstone Island. Okay, I was curious about the like the social situations. I don't know if you run into those where it's like I have a % chance to flirt or greet them or something. Like, how is that?
It's basically you just pick it and it's a random chance and you get X amount of points or you lose X amount of points based on like there's no nuance to it. It's literally just done for you in the background.
I know if there's like a Disco Elysium fail state where like you say a bad romance line. I was like, yes.
No, sadly not. That would be good.
Darn it.
What a shame. Have you played any others, Monica?
I think that's mostly it. Besides, like hopping on Rivals of Aether a bit, just because it's Rivals of Aether. It's always fun.
Fair. All right. Well,
You gotta have
I'll
one betting game in your friend group. Otherwise, it's just not valid.
for sure. Well, I can run through mine to finish us off in this section. There's not loads to get through, but one that I got super invested in was Superhot. I went and played the old like FPS time moves when you do game, and it's I always knew it was very good, but I never actually gave it the time. I think I played a little bit of it because my wife as well, she worked with Team Superhot whenever they were making Mind Control Delete, so I played a bit of their DLC content, which was essentially just Superhot but more Superhot, so it's essentially the same thing. But I hadn't played the original, so I went and played that, and it's so good. It's one of those games where you just you sort of turn your brain off, but you also have to be really engaged with it. It's very relaxing, cozy gameplay in a lot of ways because it's not high octane shooting. Time moves when you do, so it's almost like a puzzle, but time moves in just a slow amount of time where you can't pause in place for forever. So the main game was good, finished that really quickly, and then came all of the additional challenge sections, which became really hard really quickly.
Yeah. I need more shooters that are actually puzzle games because there's only like 2 of those, and one of them is Portal.
Yeah. Portal Superhot. I couldn't actually name you another one, to be honest. But yeah, the main one that really stumped me for the longest amount of time, and I was really pushing to get the platinum in this one. I really wanted it because it's a rare one. Apparently, only 0.2% of players have it, so I was very keen to grab it. I went and got it eventually, but the no restart run was such a pain. Basically, that is time completely stops, so it's you only whenever it moves. The time moves with you. It's like in the normal scenario, time moves a little tiny bit, so you can't pause in place forever, or you will eventually get shot. This one, it allows you that little brief moment to pause and go, okay, what's my next move? But equally, you have to get through all 25 levels without dying once, and it is a pain because some of the levels are like really intricate. Like, for example, there's an elevator one where you're trapped in a very small elevator with 3 enemies, and if you don't punch them in the right order at the right time, one will shoot you in the head, and that's the run done.
Oh.
Yeah.
How many times did it take? Or sorry,
how many tries? I think I had about 5 goes at it, but I was getting about most of the way through every time, and that's like half an hour, and then boom, you're done. Back to the start again. I was like, that was frustrating, but what can you do?
Have you tried Superhot VR?
No, because I have a PSVR 2, and they haven't updated it so that you can play on PSVR 2. It's just on the normal one. So if they do that, I will. But at this moment in time, I can't.
I absolutely recommend it. That is like the coolest feeling game ever.
I think it's very similar to Pistol Whip. Like this is me speaking, not having played it, but having played Pistol Whip, I'd say it's somewhat similar.
Kinda. It's more just about dodging bullets and like thinking more about what you're doing rather than instinctively dodging things and shooting at things. Because it's very similar to normal Superhot in that way, but you have a little more like timing element to it, but because you don't get the chance to think it through because you're always moving in real life.
Sure. Well, yeah, I reckon I would jump into that one and be ace at it because I know every single one of those levels back to front, inside out, and sideways now.
It's so fun.
Yeah, I mean, they milk every single bit of joy you can get out of those. Like, there's like maybe 25 levels in the game, and like every single one of them is really well made. I will say that the collectibles and the platforming you have to do to get them, that was not really well implemented because it's not a platforming game. But some of them are like really intricate to figure out. If I wasn't using a guide, I would have never found those terminals. So irritating. But I played that one, and then another one I played and spent a lot of time on, and I think it's phenomenal, and I wish I would have got to it sooner. I played The Forgotten City.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So The Forgotten City, for those that don't know, it was basically an old Skyrim mod back in the day, and eventually it got picked up by a publisher and they produced it as a fully fleshed out game with its own assets, its own engine, etc. And it's essentially like a time loop mystery. So similar to the likes of, I don't know, like Deathloop, Outer Wilds, same sort of thing where you're stuck in like a time paradox and you have to get out. But it's also wrapped up in this old, ancient kind of Roman civilization where you have these people that are trapped there. You have to figure out who's causing this problem and essentially work around this thing called the Golden Rule, which is if you commit any form of sin, the golden statues that are around the city come to life and kill you and everyone in the city. So it's essentially one of these things where you have to get around with all these loopholes and you have to figure out how this kind of repeating Groundhog Day works so that you can get out. And it's so well done. Like it's staggering how good the writing is, considering this was like previously a mod. Like this is not a writing team sitting in a room putting this together. This is just a couple of guys with a story idea that they've put together, and it feels really strong in comparison to stuff that like AAA developers make. In terms of like you don't get many games like this from a AAA developer, to be fair. But even if they tried it, I doubt they would have hit the nail on the head quite as much as they did. It's so good.
I've heard it's similar to like how Oblivion and stuff is like funny sometimes, but like on purpose.
Sort of. It's self-aware of itself. It knows that it's like it came from a mod, and sometimes it does like do these kind of self-referential things. Like for example, it names the person that meets you at the start of the game Karen, and then she said like there's this line of questioning where she doesn't want to tell you her name, and then it basically you said, "Is it because of the memes?" You're like no developer would write that, but someone that's just writing like a fan game, they will definitely do that, and it's fun. But I think the main reason it has that rep is because the facial animations and the facial assets, like they are not good. They look a little bit like alien at times. It's the only part of the game that doesn't look really fleshed out and polished, because the world looks great, the lighting, the assets, like you've even got a photo mode where you can really get some snazzy pictures of this game and it looks great, but the character assets, they are a little bit askew.
But are they bad on purpose? Because sometimes it's hard to tell.
I don't think they're bad on purpose. I think they just didn't make them particularly well. I can see how they made that link between those character assets and the radiant AI of Oblivion, but it was stupid because the AI was stupid, not because the character models were. But yeah, like aside from that, the game is so creative and so smart, and there's so many different ways that you can. Well, there actually isn't a lot of different ways you can go about it, but you get to the same conclusion. There's 4 different endings, but the way that you have to figure things out in sequence, and you have to know how this works and this works to get the solution to the next thing, it's so well crafted. It's not open-ended in the sense that you can do anything at any time. It does kind of run in a linear fashion, but it never feels that way, and that's the real brilliance of it. So if you're looking for a detective murder mystery time loop sort of game, I know that's a very niche Venn diagram, but that is the one.
Excellent.
Hey man, I still need to play Edith Finch a solo.
Yeah,
I don't know why I haven't done that.
I was actually one of the people that had played The Forgotten City when it was still a Skyrim mod, and so I actually remember it very intimately. Like, oh, I want to still be in the game, and oh, it is. And I've yet to actually play the new version of the game, but that excites me a bit. I still need to try it. I'm just worried that it'll be like a lot of the excitement and joy will be lost on me in some sections, because I think I'll probably know like the twists behind it, or like the whodunit for some of the mystery stuff.
I'd imagine the writing and like the steps to success are pretty much the same. They've maybe refined it a little bit. Like I know there's a lot of game breaking bugs in the mod that were very much present, and people were like, okay, we need to fix this. It's now pretty much 100% refined, so it'll be a much smoother experience for sure.
I'll have to try that just because of that nostalgia for that mod, actually.
Just
haven't
ask
liked it.
yourself, how much of it do you remember? And if you remember even 50% of it, I would go for it because it's really good.
It's probably less than 50%, but
Well, there you go. That's even better.
okay.
You do love to see like mods becoming full on games though, like that and like Tower Unite, which used to be like a Gmod map, and now it's like its own full game. Is that's just cool to see.
Ooh. Oh, what's that game about?
Uh, it's kind of like VR chat, but like with like Gmod physics and stuff, and a bunch of different like mini games you can play with your friends, and like a house that you can like decorate and build. They even have like emulators built in, so you can set up your own arcade.
Oh,
And I think that's really cool.
oh, that's great.
This is it. There's so many games that used to be fan games that just pop out as real games these days, and like they tend to be so much better than the things that developers can put together. Like for example, Sonic Mania. Like
Oh, that one's official.
I know, but they decided we're not good at making Sonic games. We'll bring in the people that are.
You could have said Freedom Planet, and I wouldn't agree with you, but I'd say that's still a better point. You know.
That's fair. That's fair. Well, I'll move on. I played a little bit of this, and I was going to review it, and I may still review it. I'm a little bit backlogged by other things that have popped up that have kind of took precedence, but it's so dense that I don't know if I'll be able to like get through it to the point where I can give it a good review in time. So I'm playing it. I played like the first couple hours of Saltsea Chronicles, which is like a nautical mystery game. It's very much text based, and I've seen that it got really rave reviews, and I was just sitting there thinking, I don't necessarily know what you're all seeing in this because it's clearly very artistic and very well put together, and the story, like I can see that it's building over time, and it's definitely going to get interesting by the end, I'm sure. And the world building is also good. Like it's an interesting setting of this like flooded I wouldn't call it apocalypse. Maybe I would call it apocalypse. This flooded world after the world that used to be existed, and you're basically just carrying on as these dream sealers. It's very hard to describe without actually playing it, to be honest. But I just find myself like, this is just mind-numbingly boring at times because I don't think there's enough nuance in the way that you can like make selections for yourself. It's a case of you get one decision or another decision, and you pick whichever one, and it doesn't make a large difference on the things that are taking place. I don't know if it's just chipping away slightly, and by the end, you're going to end up with a massively different kind of ending to what you would have had if you picked different options. I don't know if there's just so many branches that you're not even noticing until this point where all of a sudden you do. But at the moment, I'm not really enthralled with it. I'm not really busting to get back at it, but I imagine I will at some point. I just don't know.
Yeah, it's controversial review week at indie game culture.
Yeah, I know I'm going against the grain with that one because it didn't get a lot of review coverage, but the people that did cover it were pretty excited about it and pretty happy to give it pretty strong scores. And I was just like, I mean, it's good writing to an extent, but there's just a lot of it that just feels a bit arbitrary. It feels like it just plods along. Even with the writing, there's a lot of like grammatical errors, and like I've seen that in some, like even in Sea of Stars, I've seen that. But in that game, I didn't care. In this game, where it's completely text based, I will care a lot. It's a different vibe.
I like did a news article on it, and it looked neat, but it's like it's definitely one of those games that's like it's ride or die on having a super engaging story. So
yeah, and it kind of toes the line. It flirts with the idea of being really interesting, but it just doesn't grab me enough that I want to keep going and going. So hopefully I'll go back to it at some point, but I don't know. We'll see.
All right.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I remember seeing it, and I just thought like, oh, it's like Raft, but you have a boat. I wonder what shenanigans will ensue. So that's a little bit disappointing. Like, oh, there isn't like a fun gameplay loop around that, or a type.
Yeah, I was kind of hoping for like a little bit more like maybe resource management when you're out at sea or something, or managing your party a little bit more so that it had a bit more impact, but it all just feels extremely story based, and the story's not grabbing me, so I'm just kind of left there treading water waiting for something to happen, and it's not. But yeah, I'll move on from that one. So just very briefly, not going to give it a lot of time. It's like a 10-plus-year-old game. But whenever I was on the plane, I downloaded Papers, Please on the mobile and decided to give that a little go. And Ella quite rightly told me that was a terrible time to be playing Papers, Please whenever we were going through customs.
Just a bit.
But I was like, it's fun. And she really didn't get it.
Aw.
Which is fair. But yeah, that in itself was funny, but the game is also still very good. But moving on from that quickly, I didn't play it, but I was sitting beside her the whole time from start to finish because it's quite a short game, so I feel like I have. I basically watched in its entirety mealtime. Meal, not meal as in eat, meal as in deliver. It's a little 3D platformer where you play as a little mushroom woman and you deliver post to a variety of different people. That is like basically the long and short of it. It's a nice little platformer. It's really artistic and colorful and cute. It's like your ultimate cozy game. Ella jumped at the option to play it just because she always tells me that she wants to be a frog under a mushroom in a forest when it rains. Like that's her dream. So this was as close as she could get to that. It was really nice. And the writing is, I always say that if you go for this kind of Gen Z style writing where it's really self-aware and really like silly and using like stupid words, it can either be really funny and really like cutting and humorous, or it can be like really obnoxiously crap. But on this occasion, it's actually really funny and cute. And there's a number of really cute characters that just speak broken English, but it's in a really like kind of cute like Tumblr-esque sort of way. It's fun.
It sounds similar to Here Comes Nico, and I love that game, so I should probably check that out.
Yeah, it's one of those where you can, I think you can finish it in its entirety in like a couple of hours at most, and it's just a fun time. The writing is really good, the platforming. It is a little bit bouncy, rubbery, My First Unity kind of game at times, but not to the point where it's frustrating, just to the point where you're like, oh, I fell. I'll just get back up again.
Yeah, that sounds cool
Adorable.
It genuinely is very, very adorable. I thought it was one of those games where it's going to go one of two ways. It's either going to be like a game that's succeeded based on how cute it is visually, or it's going to be a game that is just genuinely cute across the board. And it's a very nice, cute game. And then lastly, just to wedge it in, because I've dedicated the last like 25 hours to it, I played a lot of Marvel Spider-Man 2. And yeah, I'm not going to give up.
Ways to talk about on this podcast.
Yeah, well, I mean, no one else would take it from me, so I ended up being the one that had to do it. And
I don't have a PS5.
I mean, I would say it's, if you take it in terms of like grading on a curve, it's probably not as good as the original. Like the first one captured lightning in the bottle and done it very, very well. The second one just kind of feels like we're going to do the same thing. We're going to do it bigger. And some of it works really well. Some of it just doesn't really work very well. There's a lot of like open world bloat. It kind of flirts the idea of being a Ubisoft game, which I really don't like. And the combat in the game, they haven't really changed it that much. It still feels like a Batman Arkham game, but the things they have changed have somehow made it worse. And it's okay. The story is fantastic. The traversal still feels really fun, and it looks great as well. It's just more of the same. So I'm struggling to like rave about it quite as much as everyone else is. Yeah,
it just always like every time I saw a trailer, I'm like, yep, that's sure is Spider-Man 2. It's the game again.
Yeah, like after they took more like the first Spider-Man and then put out Miles Morales, which was essentially like DLC, call it what you want, that's exactly what it was. This one does feel like there is definitely, it's justifiable to call it a sequel, and it is a good sequel. I just don't think it's like a Game of the Year contender like people are speaking it up as. It's just, I don't think it's going to cut the mustard when put up against things like Baldur's Gate and I had another one in my head and it completely just dropped out there.
Tears of the Kingdom.
Tears of the Kingdom, that is another one. Yeah. So Yeah, that's not one.
Yeah,
And
Mario Wonder.
I mean, that was part of some people's like speculation. I don't know if it's
I feel like it is just because it's so incredibly high quality and wonderfully animated. I feel like it would be weird not to, but they also hate 2D platformers, so I don't know.
yeah, I mean, if you've seen one 2D Mario game, you've probably seen them all in a lot of people's heads.
No, specifically not Mario Wonder. That one is so incredibly creative and interesting. It's insane. But I can't talk about it. It's an indie game podcast. It's not that.
True. Well, that is all that I have been playing, and that wraps us up for this section. So when we come back, we will be talking about indies that are on our radar. So stick around. Hey guys, and we are back with the second section, which is indie games on our radar. We're going to give you a rundown of the games in late October and early November that you need to keep your eye on. Who wants to tell me what they're looking forward to?
I have one at least.
Let's go.
All right.
Cuisineer specifically is the one I'm looking forward to most. It's kind of just like somehow both like this like exploration game where you go out and like find and forage stuff, and then also a cooking sim, and then also like it's kind of like Stardew Valley, but you run a restaurant essentially instead of a farm, and it looks really cool and interesting. And I actually got a review code for it, so I'm really excited.
Oh, excellent. I have to ask, from the way you described it, are you aware of Dave the Diver? Because it sounds a little bit like it's like that's Stardew Valley, but you manage a sushi restaurant. So
I mean, I've heard of it. I've not played it though.
okay.
I don't think it's that similar though, because it's pretty similar to Stardew Valley in most ways, as in like top-down like combat type thing, and also like NPC interactions in a sort of visual novel-esque type way. But yeah, it's pretty similar to Stardew, but more cooking focused, which is neat.
Cool.
Yeah, it gives me notions of, not in terms of like the aesthetic or the theme, but in terms of the format of like Cult of the Lamb, where on one side you have this resource management simulation side, and then the other side you go out in crusades and kind of dungeon run and do that other side to get the resources. And I would say it probably is quite similar to Dave the Diver as well. But that being said, Dave the Diver isn't like a dungeon crawler. It's very much a yeah. And I think Dave the Diver is a lot more multifaceted in the sense that it tries a lot more things.
Right. Like the scuba diving has a lot to it, and then it has all of the many side activities you can do to have like passive fish income or grow plants and stuff, and or like the seahorse racing that I never really got into because I didn't understand it.
Yeah, I kind of benefited from that because whenever I was doing like a list on the best farming sims, I was like, technically Dave the Diver does have farming in it, so I'm going to wedge it in here.
Yeah.
It's a very small part of the game, but sure.
It's very hard to find unique farming sims in indies nowadays. So.
But there's loads of them.
You get Stardew, take it or leave it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a few okay ones. There's a lot of them that are just like, that's Stardew Valley, you're doing it again.
I like Forager, that one's unique.
Yeah, Forager is cool. And there is one that I'm not sure if it came out recently or it's like due to come out soon, but it's called Sprout Valley, and it seems very similar to Forager, but it takes out the combat mechanics. So it's just like very chill and relaxing. Go to other islands, gather resources, go back to your island, make it nicer, but there's no like aggro of fighting enemies and stuff. So if you're into the more chill side.
Yeah, I've seen Forager on Game Pass now that I have that, so I'm like, oh, I might try that, but I worry about my time. I feel like it's another time sink.
It's one of those
give
games
it like an hour and see if you like it.
Yeah,
pretty much like that again.
I think like this might still be the case. I'm not sure, but I think there is like a free 3-hour demo that you can play of Forager.
Okay.
I know there was like a game jam build where they put out like a 3-hour kind of trial session of it, and it might still exist. So if you want to try it without paying any money, it could still be there. But I don't think I'll ever go back to Forager. I played a little bit of it, but I found out that there is no platinum trophy for it, and that ruled it out.
Oh.
Yeah. On top of that, Karma Zoo is another one I was interested in. Devolver game, I think. Question mark? I don't remember. But it's essentially just like a 2D platformer battle royale, kind of like a co-op battle royale. So not really a battle, just a royale. But there's just a bunch of players that are all in this like 2D platformer, like puzzle type thing, and you can all help each other out and try to use each other's like unique abilities from the character you chose to like get across obstacles, and it all looked very cool. Not exactly sure how exactly that works in execution, but it's a cool concept. So I'd be willing to give that a shot.
So it's kind of like collaborative Fall Guys.
I wouldn't say Fall Guys because it's more pure puzzle platforming rather than chaotic minigame type sometimes platforming things. And it's also it's 2D, so it's very simplistic and trying to just give you sort of a mass co-op type vibe to a puzzle platformer, which is neat.
That sounds cool. If for some reason I'm like comparing it in my head to like Bread and Fred, it kind of seems a little bit similar, minus like the Royale.
Kinda. It's like that, but like if you had like 8 other people.
Yeah.
And they all could do different things.
Yeah. That sounds cool. Is there any others, or are they your ones on the radar?
Ghost Runner 2 also, which is like vaguely indie enough to talk about. I've mostly just seen the original Ghost Runner. I didn't play it, but it looks really cool, and I've always wanted to. So I've had both those games on my radar forever.
Yeah, well, I played the first Ghost Runner, and I can't speak about it, but I am reviewing Ghost Runner 2. I got a code for that recently. We got a PS5 one, so obviously it fell to me because literally there's only me. I'm playing through that one. I've only played a little tiny bit of it because it's been all Spider-Man, and I'm finally done with that now. But I played a little bit of it, and it's definitely a step up from the original one. I can't say any more than that because there is an embargo, but
yeah,
keep an eye on that one.
Okay.
I can say more because I don't have the embargo because I haven't played it. But it just looked really cool. It's the same type of parkour platformer type mixed with very cool like sword and gun combat that is in a like super incredible like cyberpunk aesthetic, and I just absolutely loved everything that looked like it. It looked like a really cool movement shooter, and I really wanted to try it. I still haven't. There's a lot of video games I need to play one day.
Yeah, it's very Mirror's Edge, but with combat. Well, with better
Mirror's
combat.
Edge, yeah, already has combat, but
Yeah, it's very much tacked on in Mirror's Edge.
Intense, focused combat.
Yeah, very like almost like Cyberpunk Samurai combat. And then I think the second one, it's trying to include, and I think this is in like the media, so I'm not like revealing anything, but it includes a lot of like vehicle sections now, like with motorcycles and stuff. So could be interesting. I can't say either way, but
I hope it
maybe it's interesting.
I hope it doesn't have
You'll never know.
The really traumatic falling scenes that Mirror's Edge had. That's like you would fall to your death, and there'd just be a very loud sound as you're falling, and it's just terrifying. And that scared me so much as a little kid that the only thing I really remember is that game is like those death, like the game over scenes were just the worst things imaginable. That just gave me like a fear of heights for the longest time.
yeah, if you're not into like heights, and if those videos on TikTok where people are like hanging off buildings give you the fear, the Mirror's Edge is definitely going to give you the fear.
Yeah. So I think that's pretty much it for me. I don't think I have anything else.
Awesome. Well, I'll jump in with a couple. So my ones are, I've seen this one, and I'm including it, but I don't know if this is like AAA or indie because I looked at who's producing it, and it's the Square Enix Collective, but I don't know how much they actually have to do with the game whatsoever because I don't know if it's their publishing house or if it's like an affiliate of them. I couldn't quite work it out, so I'm just going to include it anyway. It's a game called Little Goody Two Shoes, which is like inspired by PS2 RPG era games. Kind of reminds me of things like, well, it reminds me of ones that are slightly older, like Chrono Trigger and Xenogears and stuff like that. I feel it's closer to that sort of thing. And you play as Goody Little Two Shoes in this like kind of village setting, and it's got like this horror narrative edge to it, which looks really interesting. And it's I think it's turn-based combat. It's got exploration style gameplay to it as well, a little bit of resource management as well. It's got quite a lot to it. It's quite multifaceted, but I was really kind of turned on to it by the aesthetic, which is it almost looks like one of those like old GBA games, and I just really like the look of that.
Kind of like the Castlevania GBA games.
Yeah, it's kind of like those games, even the turn-based RPGs that you would get on the GBA, which they wanted to retain the same kind of like fidelity as like the main style games, but obviously couldn't do it because of the hardware. So they've managed to do it in some regard, but they've had to strip some assets back, and it kind of looks like that, but intentionally. So it looks really polished to the point where you're like, okay, they're not doing that because they have to; they're doing it because they want to, and it looks very good.
It looks gorgeous for some of the screenshots I've seen.
Yeah, it looks really interesting, which is why I'm kind of questioning how much Square Enix have actually been involved in it, because it does look really polished to the point where I'm like, maybe they do have quite a tight hold on it. But I don't think I've heard of the developer before. I don't know if they've done anything, or if it might be their debut project. So I'm willing to give it an out.
Might just be like the weird like power wash sim type beat where you really want to call it an indie, but Square Enix said it's our game now.
Yeah, that's the same sort of vibe, I'd reckon. So that one's definitely interesting. Another one that I have written down here, but I'm not sure if this is actually coming out in October, because it's listed on some kind of outlets as it's coming in October, but there are other places that say it's coming in 2024. I'm just going to mention it. I don't know. So it's called Mika and the Witch's Mountain. I'm not sure if it's going to come out in October. There is talk that it might do, and basically it's a very lovely like a 3D platformer. It's very Studio Ghibli meets Summer and Mara meets A Hat in Time. It looks very, very nice. There's not a lot you can really say about a 3D platformer. It's going to do exactly what you expect it to do, but it also kind of has like a semi-open world where you can fly on your broom to get around, so the traverse is going to be fun as well. I don't know much more about it than that. I just know that it looks really cute and I want to play it.
You did remind me of something. It's not like coming out soon, but it's getting like a presentation where they show more gameplay soon. It's Penny's Big Breakaway, which is like a 3D platformer done by the Sonic Mania devs, and it looks so good. And there's like gameplay being shown on the 29th. And I'm so excited to see that.
So fingers crossed for a shadow drop, yeah?
I don't think that will happen. I just fingers crossed that it's like not 2 years from now.
Yeah, that's fair. See, that's realistic.
Yeah.
But yeah, aside from Mika and the Witch's Mountain, I also have a couple of ones that I'm not personally interested in, but I feel like they deserve to be mentioned because they are big deals. So we are going to have coverage of the Talos Principle 2, which is coming out on the 2nd of November. It's the follow-up to the Talos Principle, which was like groundbreaking in terms of like puzzle gaming. It's one of those where it really doesn't hold your hand, and it's obnoxiously kind of obtuse in the way it wants you to do things, but if you work out how things are done in the game, very clever, very well put together, very complex story as well, but very good at the same time. And I'd imagine Talos Principle 2 is just going to carry on and do all of those same things again. It's not necessarily my thing, but I know it's going to be very good for those that do enjoy that sort of thing.
Yeah,
so it's The Witness.
It's basically The Witness, yeah.
I'd started playing through the first one after I heard the second one was coming out, like a little article on that, and I was like, oh, I'll check out the first one. It's on sale, and I liked the writing and stuff in it. Like, it's really clever, funny. It's like you get to get in an argument with the computer and I say like, help me, or okay, I forgot some of the scenes, but it's some really funny moments there. But yeah, the puzzles are so absurdly hard in some sections. I have no idea what to do.
Yeah, it's one of those games where it doesn't really want to tutorialize the things that it wants to do. It just wants you to work them out on your own, and you're like, I could just give me a few crumbs, like a bread trail to follow, and then once I get there, we're fine. And it just doesn't want to do that. And I would very much imagine the second one's going to be the same, if the developers anything to go by, because they tend to be very much fixated on their own ideas and they don't waver from that at all. So good for them in a way, but equally feedback is important.
Yeah.
And then I've also got For the King 2, which is coming out. Again, it's not my sort of thing. It's kind of your co-op, kind of scale back RPG. Very accessible, very good co-op RPG, similar to the likes of I have one in my head now. It's gone. I'm thinking Trine, but Trine's not the right answer. But yeah, basically a very nice co-op RPG that you can get into. That's all I really have to say on that one. If you enjoy it, you enjoy it. And then I also have written down My Time at Sandrock, which is coming to PC full release and console as well. And Monica is currently reviewing that, but it is under embargo, so we can't say a lot about it. But in a word, is it worth getting excited about? Yes or no?
If you really like farming.
There you go. If you really like farming.
That's all I'm saying.
It's just farming simulators are really at a premium on PS5. We don't get a lot of them, so I'm thinking this is a big scale one. People like My Time at Porsche. This will probably be good as well. And
if you like the first game, definitely, yeah.
Yeah.
It's more of that.
It's more of that. So there you go.
In a vague way, yes.
There you go. And then the last one I have down, which is coming for full release. I don't think it's coming for PlayStation, but it is going to go to PC and Xbox. Coral Island is coming out of early access and it's getting a full release. So if you're wanting a farming sim and you don't want My Time at Sandrock, Coral Island is the answer.
Yeah, that's been in early access for a while, and I've seen plenty of friends play through it, so kind of excited to see it come out of early access. I mean, it's been there for a long time, so...
Yeah, it's finally done, so it's coming. But yeah, that's all the ones I have written down. JT, what you excited for?
Yeah, well, there's one really good title that I played through the demo of it, and I really, really liked it. It's called Slay the Princess. It's a kind of no, it's not semi. It is a visual novel sim, but it's where you have to slay a princess, and if she leaves the cabin, the world will end, so she has to go. And it's just a great game to play through for like the month of October. Like, it's a very spooky psychological horror, but it's very much that meets the Stanley Parable, because the game has a narrator that's very like, you start arguing with them and say like, well, isn't killing the princess kind of bad? It says, what are you, a monarchist? And there's a lot of fun scenes with that where like the narrator, like, you don't know if you can trust him at certain parts, or they lead you into kind of horrible situations. And it's still like, it can be a funny, like, kind of comfort game at some parts, and it's not just like a still image for the visual novel stuff. Like, it's like all the visuals are like kind of an animated GIF, so everything's moving a little bit, or there's little features where, like, if you move around the mouse, your field of view changes a little bit, which is like, it's actually a very nice touch and is great for those. But it's yeah, I just played through the demo. It was really good, and it did something very clever where God, it's funny because the horror is that you're the kind of the bad guy. I mean, it says you're the hero, but it's like very much you're watching yourself doing it, and you're kind of horrified with what you're doing, and it's like, oh no, and it gets in your head a little bit. But it's I don't want to say anything because that would spoil it, but it does something really clever, and then you're like, there's actually a lot more to the game than just like the simple premise. I mean, the premise is still there, but it just keeps going, and you're like, oh, this is a whole thing. But I don't know, I highly recommend it if you want to check it out. The game is coming out today, but the demo is available, and it's enough to get you excited about it. So go play it.
I remember seeing a bit of that, like the trailer for that, in the horror games presentation, like the indie horror one, and like, despite me absolutely hating that presentation, that one did look neat, mostly because it was not Resident Evil.
No, I'd imagine I couldn't give myself give any time to it, because even when the Stanley Parable came out and everyone was raving about it being amazing and fourth wall breaking and generation defining, I was like, I find the fourth wall breaking really obnoxious, and I still do. So I'd imagine I would find it the same in this one.
Yeah, at least the game is fairly light on the fourth wall breaking, but the narrator is like very there. They're very much like one of the characters of the game, so if that feels like kind of grating, it's that can get annoying, but at least the writing is very good, and it's very much like, it keeps track of like your responses, and you can like, it's very aware of like how people would respond. I try to play it like very nice, and it's like, well, sorry, but you have to go, and And just like
Well,
then the
you played
game,
the game as a nice person. You role played as a nice person. That shocks me.
I
No, you couldn't have.
well, I tried. I was like, well, I killing does seem kind of bad though. I'll see about it. And
Just dip your
then
toe, see how you feel.
yeah,
Maybe just like decapitate someone, see how you go.
yeah, just a little murder, just a small one.
Yeah.
Just a little bit. You have a little bit of fun.
Exactly. But now, anyways, that's one of the better visual novels I played from the start. I haven't gone very far into it because obviously it's just the demo. But if you're looking for a good spooky game for the month of October, I very much recommend it. And yeah, besides that, that was the one I was the most excited for. But there's two others. One of them is Buildermint, which is a cozy Factorio-esque sim, but basically Factorio, but they tank out the monsters, so you don't have to worry about like monsters invading your base, which was kind of the point of it, where it's like, okay, build a base and build a rocket to get off the planet before the monsters overtake you. And it's like, the more you build is the more it generates more pollution, which sends more of the monsters after you, and the monsters become tougher, so you have to take out their nests. And this game, it removes that element and focuses on being more of a cozy game. So it's like very nice visuals, it's very comfy, and like you're sending resources back to Earth to save the world. So it just seems very adorable. And yeah, I think just because I really liked Factorio and I spent an unreasonable amount of hours into that game, I think I'll enjoy that. But I'm going to be very careful and like set limits for myself because I know it can take a lot of my time.
It's one of those or puzzle-esque sim management games where there's no end goal. It can be really dangerous. Dwarf Romantic had me for
Oh.
such a long time just because you just place a tile and then another tile and keep going endlessly and there's no consequences. I can see that being the same.
Yeah, very scary in that sense, but also I love those games. It's like I love there's an argument saying like the antagonist is you from like several hours ago because you built the factory the wrong way and now you're in like a resource deadlock. So it's like, what have I done? Curse you, me from the past.
Yeah, it's
So-
where your usual agent of chaos rule really comes back to bite you.
Yeah, it's like, why did I do that? I understand what I did.
It was funny at the time.
Yeah, and now it's like, oh, how do I get myself out of this mess? And then you just create a worse solution, and then you just by the end of the game, you don't know what you built. You can't understand anything, and it's great. And for the last one, there's a game called 3 Minutes to 8, which is a Groundhog Day meets Blade Runner-esque cyberpunk dystopia kind of game, and it's looks kind of interesting. It's another Groundhog where it's like it's a time loop game where you'll have only a few minutes to explore worlds before an android hunter or a police person hunts you down and gets you, or something happens you're supposed to expire, and it's like in various other ways. So you're trying to escape the time loop, figure out who did what. You're talking to other people, and I really love the setting of it. The game does have a demo, and you could check it out if that's for you. But it's very much, it reminded me of like the same kind of style of Dave the Diver. Like it almost looked identical in some sections with the pixel art. And I love Dave the Diver, so any chance to play more of that. I like to imagine like it's a slimmed down version of Dave, and he's just in the future now. So I just want that to be my headcanon for the character. But it's I don't know, it looks interesting, but I imagine it's going to be very boring if you're not a big fan of RPG Maker kind of games where it's a lot of walking around and talking. The gameplay is more just investigating. So if you're not okay with that, or if that's not enough for you, then it may not be your cup of tea, but it looks like a cute kind of sci-fi game.
So-
I love those.
So it's like Cyberpunk time loop one shot.
Pretty much, yes.
That sounds awesome.
Yeah, actually, that's a great way to describe it. Yeah, that really sums it down. But yeah, it is a 2D side scroller, but again, for what it is, it looks really nice. So very much recommend it.
I'm all about a time loop. They don't make enough of them. There needs to be more time loop games.
True.
But yeah, that is our games on the radar, guys. Whenever we come back, we're going to be going into our big discussion, which is Halloween themed. It's Spoopy Month, if you hadn't heard, and we're going to be going through some spoopy games. So stick around.
Ooh,
Hey, and we are back for our final session, the big discussion. This time we are getting spoopy with it, and we're going to be talking about the best games, indie games that is, to play this Halloween. So we'll all be taking a different kind of approach to this one. Me personally, I'll be going for your kind of pseudo spooky horror, where it's horror but not jump out and jump scare you kind of scary. JT has been going to be doing his natural self, where he's going to be going full in on the horror. And I
Yeah.
think Monica is probably going to be following me in my direction. So
Yeah, close enough. Mostly just the like Nightmare Before Christmas, Luigi's Mansion type things where it's not going to really scare you at all. It's just got the vibe,
it's
except for one of them, which will scare you a lot. Don't worry about that one.
all right. Well, I say we just go round robin and do one at a time. So I'll jump in and then we'll go around. First one I'm going to bring up is Dredge. I think Dredge is a really good one to play this Halloween. It's a new one. It's very much spooky, but not to the point where you're going to be consistently scared throughout, especially in the latter half of the game where the horror really feeds and it just becomes a fishing management game and a little bit of a puzzler as well. But what I will say is the first 1 to 2 hours of that game, you will be terrified because it does a really good job of doing these Eldritch horror-esque kind of tricks on the mind where you have to go out in the dead of night and you'll hear foghorns in the distance that aren't there, and you'll be bumping into rocks that weren't there previously that just kind of spawn in and hit you, and there's going to be like rumblings in the dark. It's very, very good at getting in your head, especially in those early hours. And aside from that, it is essentially a fishing resource management game where you basically go out, go to spots, catch fish, put them together in kind of your Resident Evil Tetris sort of platform, and then bring them back and sell them, and you upgrade your boat, and as your boat gets better you can go to different areas and solve puzzles, and it's a very fun game. It does definitely drop off towards the end in terms of enjoyment, where it just becomes a bit of a war of attrition to get things done because your boat's already fantastic and there's no sense of fear or urgency anymore. You're just kind of plodding along to the finish. It really loses that sense of drive towards the end. But for those initial hours alone, where you're in the dead of night and there's that risk and reward of, will I stay out for another hour and try and catch another fish, or will I die because I do that? And it is very, very good. And it's also one of those games where you kind of have that core gameplay loop where it's like, okay, one more day and then I'll stop, and one more day and then I'll stop, and you never actually do. So it's a very, very good game, and definitely one to play this Halloween.
I was going to recommend it too, and also I absolutely love describing it as fish Tetris.
It basically is fish Tetris.
It's so true, but I still haven't finished it, so I can't talk much about it. But, I need to.
Yeah, it's one that I think you'll definitely lose the vibe and the enjoyment of it as the time goes on. And once you get all the resources in abundance, you're kind of like, okay, well, the core gameplay loop drops off. There's no risk and reward anymore. It's all reward.
Yeah. I think, like, definitely one of those games I'd recommend anyone to check out if they're more into the, like, you want the vibe of, like, horror, but you don't want to, like, necessarily be scared too much, and also you just want a game that you can play that isn't trying to make you not want to play it anymore constantly. Like, it's just a fun game.
Yeah, and I bring this up every time I talk about it, but it's just because it has the same vibe. If you enjoyed the PS1 demo disc game Overboard, then you'll love this game because it allows you to play as a boat. I've never played another game where you just play as a boat other than Overboard, which was like a old PS1 puzzle game. Anyone that had a demo disc back in the day will know what that is. And it shows my age, but it's fine. But yeah, JT, you jump in.
Yeah. Also, I'd say, like, I think Dredge is a great pick. Like, it's a very good, like, cozy horror. It does get, like, pretty grindy towards the end, but, like, yeah, that beginning part's just, like, just the perfect balance of, like, spooky and, like, oh, this is nice. For me, I'd say I'd start with Ib, which is a psychological horror RPG maker game where you play as a little girl that gets transported to an alternate world of an art museum where the place is completely deserted except for a few characters, and you have to explore a kind of twisted art museum where all the paintings try to kill you, and there's several endings where, like, you get stuck in the museum or you become one of the paintings, and it's it's a little bit disturbing, and it's not too horrific or like there are a few jump scares, but most of it is pretty like palatable. But it's a nice, quick, easy game to play through for Halloween if you want a little spook or just feel a little bit disturbed. And there are some like nice endings to it too, so that's nice. And all the paintings are actually kind of clever. There's actually a little achievement where if you get all 100% of them, then it shows you a nice little painting of everybody together. And it's actually kind of sweet. But yeah, again, there's plenty of those other RPG Maker horror games that will probably fit the bill, but Ib is like definitely one of the cream of the crop. It's very, I think it's been used very much as like a lot of people point to Ib as like a good RPG Maker horror game. So yeah, that's one of my favorites, and it's definitely a nice one to play through.
It's one of those I definitely thought you were going to bring up. I had it in my head that you were going to mention Ib, and then you were going to do Amori, and then you were going to do Grimm's Hollow, and then you were
Colin,
don't spoil the rest of the podcast.
I just know you, man. I know what you're going to do.
Yeah.
But yeah, Monica, give us your first one.
I'm honestly surprised this wasn't brought up first. It's like the de facto best indie game of last year. And if you haven't played it since launch, then I'd absolutely recommend it this year. Inscription.
Yes.
Insanely good, spooky, like sort of creepypasta vibe to it, where it's kind of meta, but in an insanely cool and interesting way. And I'm pretty sure most people already know it because it was so popular last year. And since then, it's gotten Casey's mod, which is like a roguelite mode. And that is so fun. And it has turned this 5-hour game into a 50-hour one. And I absolutely adore it. And if you haven't like gone back to it since, then I'd absolutely recommend that.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah. It's a game that I've had mixed opinions on, and I've said it on the podcast before, but I'll say it again. I really loved the first half, absolutely adored it. Loved the kind of slay the spire, get up the kind of the map card system, and then whenever it turned into a top-down RPG, I hated it and I turned it off.
But it's so good.
I didn't like the juxtaposition of it. It added in like 3 different card varieties in amongst the ones that I knew, and I was like, this is a bit much. I don't really want to learn all this halfway into the game.
Yeah, it was pretty
Like that-
excessive. I thought.
That's fair. I also felt like a little tired when I got to that part, but honestly, like Act 3 fully makes up for it. It is so it's an entirely different game that is the same core mechanics, and it's so cool. And then also Casey's mod is just Act 1, but with extra stuff in it. So yeah. I'd also recommend just going back to that if you really want to just keep playing through Act 1.
Yeah, I kind of want to go and get the platinum for the games. I really enjoy the Act 1 gameplay. And I know that there's that hurdle of getting through that top-down kind of Zelda-esque RPG. Yeah. I just can't be bothered doing it. But if I got through it, I'd enjoy everything thereafter. There's a huge mental block.
If you want a hot tip, get an Ouroboros and the way to make bone cards, and then you just keep summoning Ouroboros and killing it infinitely, and then it'll do 100 damage.
Yeah, it tracks like progress between runs. So like if you die in a run, it still has that amount of damage. So, and even once you get to the retro world, it still has that damage. So it trivializes the entire game.
Very good. But if you just really want to get through the game, just do that and go. Yeah. That's it.
That sounds like something I might do.
Also, I love the like real world video sections of it. Like it's felt really kind of cheesy some parts, but like the horror at the end was like it felt very effective. I was like, oh, that got me.
It's the perfect framing because while it is like cheesy and like kind of poorly acted, it's in context a YouTuber, so it makes sense. It's so well done. It's like, yeah, he would act like that. That was just like a random card YouTuber guy who has like 50 subs.
Yeah, I do enjoy the first act. Obviously, the card-based mechanics are the thing that take precedence, but the escape the room style kind of puzzles are also great as well. And just the overall aesthetic of that room, which the eyes peering at you, it's really unsettling, but not in a way where you're like, I'm terrified. It's just like, oh, I don't like the look of him. I'm going to ignore him.
Won't spoil it, but that does kind of come back in Act 3. So absolutely recommend that.
Oh, good.
Act 3 is very good.
Yeah, well, I'll jump in with my next one. I'm going to jump in with a twofer, but it's because they're both very similar. I'm going to mention Oxenfree and Oxenfree 2. So they are basically narrative-based games. The first one is very like Stranger Things teen bop. The second one is a bit more of a mature kind of adult story with a lot of kind of callbacks to the first one, but it all happens on this island where you can control radio frequencies, and through doing so, they inadvertently open up a time paradox to this world where the people that have died in a kind of World War One submarine are trapped in this other dimension. They release them and they try to get out in any way they can, and it turns into this really interesting Stranger Things horror affair. What I will say is the second one is definitely not as good as the first, not even close. It's still pretty competent, but the first one is very, very good at doing the horror to the point where I did not expect it to be quite as scary as it was. It's got a couple of good jump scares in there. It's got this genuine feeling of like eeriness and ominousness, and you're kind of on edge the whole time. The second one is more about kind of the narrative and the characters and getting to know them. And there is a little bit of a horror subtext, but nowhere near as much. So if I was going to recommend one of the two, it's definitely going to be the first one. But the second one's worth playing if you played the first one. If you're just playing the second one on its own, do not bother. It's been definitely one that you would play just for the fan service and getting to know what happened to the characters from before. But yeah, it's very good. Now, what I would say is if you're looking for gameplay, it's not the game for you, because you essentially just walk and you pick dialogue options, and that's basically it. There are a couple of collectibles that you can get, and like platforming to the point where you pick the platform and it goes to the platform, so there isn't really platforming. But yeah, it's similar to platforming in the way that Stray had platforming, in the sense that there's a platform up there, you pick it, and the cat jumps to it. Same sort of thing.
Persona 5 platforming.
Yeah, same sort of thing, exactly. So that is the one that I would definitely recommend. Oxenfree 1, and then 2 if you're willing to sit through that one as well. And also, just a weird one, it is one of those rare kind of full-fledged games that you can play on Netflix. So if you have a Netflix subscription, you can go on your mobile and you can play it. And I found out the other day that they actually have a really good selection of games on mobile if you go through Netflix. Anna Purna got really into the mobile games. You can play things like Storyteller and 12 Minutes, and you can also play Spiritfarer on there. Like, they have a really good selection.
The only Netflix game I've played is Pointy, because that's the one the Downwell creator made, and that's really good.
Yeah, there's a couple of really cool things on there. I don't know if I'm ever going to make use of them, but if you're someone that kind of doesn't really bother with games too much, and you're like very much into like Android gaming, this might be your way to edge your way into indie gaming. Why would you be listening to us is the question for sure, but you know.
I think it's like a Amazon Prime Video, where like you get it for a different service, and then it's just like, okay, I have this now on the side.
Yeah, it's a nice little bonus for sure. JT, give me a spoopy horror.
All right, so I'm not going to mention this Mori this time, because after you just mentioned it, I feel like we've had to go over it. So I'll do it in the next round. But another one I was thinking of is more just horror games to play with friends that can be spooky, but not so much. But like more in the realms of Friday the 13th, which is actually going to be gone at the end of this month. So actually, Texas Chainsaw Massacre might be a better alternative, which is going to be available on Game Pass. But Friday the 13th, basically, it's a horror game with friends where one person plays as a serial killer, Jason, and all the others are the counselors trying to escape. And it's horror, but it's also very silly too. So it's like, if you're playing randomly alone, it can be kind of scary, because like you see this killer and like the screen gets scary, your HUD starts like going away, and you get kind of freaked out. It's like, oh no, I don't know if I'll get away. But it's very funny, like trying to outwit your friends, and like the whole premise is that there's a few ways to get out of to escape Jason. Like, you can escape by boat, by car, but Jason can teleport and actually stop the car, and you have to restart it. And like, we've had some situations where like we were in the car, Jason would stop it, and then we'd have to restart it. We have to whack Jason as he's like holding someone down, like get them off of Jason. So it's like, all right, and then get back in the car, and then Jason does the same thing, and this happens a couple of times, and we're all just laughing. It's like how are we still alive? And Or there's bits where like you're just trying to outsmart Jason, like, or me and a friend where one person was chasing me as Jason for 15 minutes just through a set of houses, and everyone else just got away, but they were just dead set on taking me down, and it was really nerve-wracking, and I was getting nervous, but everyone was just having a laugh at my expense. I was like, "Oh, come on, guys, help me!" And I was like, "No, JT, we believe." It's like, "What the heck? You're not being of any help!" And it got so tense, and it was just such a good Halloween-esque game, and. Texas Chainsaw Massacre, just because Friday the 13th is going to be gone soon, that might be a better one to gravitate towards. It's just that one is, yeah, there's 3 killers, they're not quite as powerful to make up for it, and there's 4 survivors. So, keep them under radars, but if you really want to check out a nice horror game before it's gone, you may want to check out Friday the 13th, but again, it's going to be gone soon, so... I think will be off sale at the end of this month, and then the servers will end at the end of December. So if you get it before then this month, you have a few months to check it out before it's gone.
Awesome. And then I would just kind of latch onto that and say that there are some really good like PvP horror games that are not my thing, but like things like Dead by Daylight, and there's a game called Deceit that's also quite good. It's very like Among Us-esque rather than PvP horror, but also very good.
Yeah,
that's another one of the social deduction games. Yeah.
I've also heard of Phasmophobia, I think that's more PvE.
But yeah, I I know a lot of people like Phasmophobia. I never really got into it just because I'm very bad at deducing some of the monster stuff. Just because some of the clues feel kind of like, was that really a clue or do we just imagine that kind of thing? So, and it usually ends up with like a bunch of me and my friends like bickering between each other, and just, that never like feels too much fun. So.
Among Us.
I guess Phasmophobia can have, it is like that, but Phasmophobia can have the some of the jump scare bits where you get locked in a room with a ghost and you have to like throw some salt down or pull out a crucifix to get the ghost off you or else you die. And that can feel like genuinely spooky, but just because some of the game feels kind of, I don't know, like I don't understand how to get away from some of the ghosts, and it feels just kind of, I'll describe it doesn't feel very polished for some of those parts, but you know, it's a fine investigative horror game, and you could just leave in the van at any time, too. So I feel like that takes some of the stakes out of it. But, I don't know, Phasmophobia just isn't for me.
Yeah. I wouldn't really have the ability to talk about it because I've never played it. I just heard it's a good co-op, like, horror game.
I mean, it can be fine. Definitely a great stream game, but yeah I'm not so sure for me.
Yeah. Monica, give us another one.
So my favorite game of all time is only like 25% scary, but man, that 25% is insane, and that's Outer Wilds. So like most of the game, right? You're chilling. It's an incredibly interesting and like beautiful game, and then you get to like Dark Bramble, and then it is the most horrifying thing you've ever seen. And then if you go to the DLC, then it's even more so. I think I genuinely had like an anxiety attack in the middle of that, and then had to pause the game for 10 minutes. But it was so incredibly like engaging and interesting, and I just really wanted to see what was going on that I just kept going regardless of that. I've never had a game do that to me before, and it was insane. And I absolutely just love Outer Wilds, and I can't say more of it, or else I'll spoil the game for the people I'm recommending it to.
Yeah, it's one of those games where you talk about it too much and you give away some of the magic, I suppose.
Yeah.
I feel like giving a horror warning is fair, because when you boot up the game, it's just like, oh yeah, this game has horror in it, by the way.
Yeah, it doesn't even tell you in any sort of regard until you visit Dark Bramble, and then you suddenly go, this is definitely different to the rest of the planets.
The DLC does, actually. Like, when you start up the game, you'll get like a prompt on the screen saying, oh, by the way, you can turn on reduced frights if you literally cannot live if you play this. Because it is very terrifying.
See, I've never played any of Echoes of the Eye, so I wouldn't know. I've only played the base.
Oh, I'd absolutely recommend it. It's like essentially Outer Wilds 2, but like more like 1.5. It genuinely explains things in the lore I didn't know I needed explained, and it's awesome.
Yeah, I also thought crashing the spaceship always felt kind of scary. Just like, oh no, everything is going wrong.
I just kept doing that for fun. And honestly, at the end of that game, it made me feel a different kind of horror where I'm just like thinking about life differently and like on the couch, like crying. It is insanely good. That is my favorite game of all time, and I absolutely recommend it if you haven't. And also if you haven't done the DLC, go do it because it's very scary. It's the vibe.
Yeah. I want to go and play Echoes of the Eye, but my thought process is I'm going to wait like 3 or 4 years until I've basically forgotten the solution to Outer Wilds, and then I'm going to play it through, and then Echoes of the Eye.
Well, Echoes of the Eye is a completely separate thing to the base game, pretty much, but it's like a very long thing.
I
So
know, but I feel like I'd want to like kind of brush up on all of the lore and read all of the Nomai extracts again and kind of refresh so that I was going in and had it all there.
yeah,
Yeah, well, I really like the Outer Wilds too, and I think that's a really good choice in terms of like it is spoopy, but only in that really small portion. And I remember the first time that I went into Dark Bramble, and I think it was maybe the first or second planet that I went to in the solar system, and I was completely blindsided by it because I was like, okay, so you can go through here, and okay, this is all misty and dark, and I don't know what's going on, and oh dear, there's a vibe here, I don't like it.
there's like the only living creatures aside from like your home planet, and it's insane.
Yeah, I'll not tell the listener what they are, but they
Yeah.
are grotesque
They
and
do
horrifying.
exist, and they exist. But I think the scariest thing about that game is it doesn't actually have "the" in the title. It's just Outer Wilds.
Yeah, well that's down to the Outer Worlds. That's what happened there.
Yeah,
Oh,
Yeah, it
the
was
confusion.
really unfortunate for them that in the same year, basically at the exact same time, they were launching together. And I mean, I suppose it gave it a little bit of traction because people were then kind of finding the Outer Wilds by mistake and then finding out, oh, that's actually a really cool game too. But equally, it means that people are probably going to find the Outer Worlds quicker.
Yeah. Just get a bit confused.
Yeah. But it's definitely the better of the two, in case you're wondering.
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. I'd absolutely recommend Outer Wilds over like a kind of mid Bethesda type game.
Yeah. I mean, let's not put Obsidian and Bethesda in the same boat. Obsidian are much nicer, but whatever.
I'm just saying that's the like style that it's going for.
Oh yeah, it definitely is. It definitely is. But yeah, I'll jump in with another one. So this is one that I reviewed in, I think it was March time, and I really enjoyed it. It's a Team 17 one called Killer Frequency. It's basically a kind of puzzle narrative game where you play as this radio DJ that's came from Chicago. He's lost his job and he's in this like kind of backwater American town, and he has to essentially just do the night shift on this dead end radio show where like 30 people listen, and they're all from the town where he does the show. So it's pretty much a pointless job for him. And basically what happens on that show is he gets a call in that there's a murder on the loose, and it's this murderer that was there from 30 years back. They never caught him. He's resurfaced on that night. The sheriff has been killed. They need to get to the nearby town to get back up. But in the meantime, there's no one to man the 911 calls. So that ends up being you. And everyone from the town then rings into the radio station and says, the killer's going to get me, and you have to solve these puzzles to get them out of that situation. And if you fail to do so, they die.
Sounds very
So-
anxiety inducing. Like, oh no, I don't.
It is. It's very much high stakes, and you don't get to kind of rest with your decision because it's on a timer. So you either go, I'm okay, I'm going to do this one or this one, and you just pick, and then suddenly they're dead, and you're like, oh, well, you shouldn't have put a timer on me. I wanted to think about it. But yeah, it's very 80s slasher movie inspired. It's very like kitschy and cheesy, but there are moments where like you're just wandering the radio station because you have to go downstairs to get something or whatever, and like you'll hear tapping on the window, or you're like just have this like ominous silence, or like a light will flicker, and you're like, oh, this is not good. I need to get back upstairs to my booth. So there are definitely horror vibes to it, but it's very entry level horror. So it's definitely one for you guys that, as Malika put it, horror for cowards.
I like that term, horror for cowards.
Yeah, it's
It
great.
makes sense.
Yeah.
JT, tell me.
All right, well, I do want to mention Amori because
Of
I
course
love
you
it,
do.
and there is a genuinely good horror scene in it. When you Oh, well, I should say what the game is. Basically, the game is an RPG Maker game with it's a very nice visuals and turn-based combat, and it's just everything is like hand drawn, and it's a really strong story. It's gosh, how to describe it? But yeah, it's a really good RPG Maker game. But so basically, the game sets as you play as Amori, which is a dream version of a real-world character that goes into his dreams to confront his repressed memories and stuff. And you go on crazy adventures with space pirates, or you confront a lady named Sweetheart, who is like an evil maid girl, or you go inside the belly of a whale and fight a bunch of sea witches. And it is some really fun like moments. And but then you get to you have these moments where like some of the evil memories creep in, and you have these kind of really disturbing horror scenes. And at the very climax of the game, you go to a place called Black Space, which is basically a negative version of the real world. And throughout the game, you're trying to find your friend Basil, and he's been kidnapped. And eventually, you go to Black Space, and you find different versions of him. And just as you're about to get him out, he suffers these really horrific fates, and it just gets more and more disturbing. And there's even this one part where you have to do something really horrible to a cat, which I don't forgive the creator Omocat for making me think I had to do. And it's like genuinely good horror, and it's really disturbing and sets you on edge. And then it ends, and then you find out like more of the story and what you've done, and it's really just it holds you down. It like makes you just go through this awful, horrible scene, but it's such good, like well-designed horror, and the build-up to it is so good. I will say that it is about a 20-hour game, so you have to prepare yourself, and it does have quite a bit of turn-based combat, but the story is great, and it has a lot of comfort to it too, in that first 2/3 of it. So, it's there's a lot to love about it, even if you aren't into the horror. But once you get there, you're gonna have to experience a lot of it to go through it. So it's a really good thing to experience for Halloween if you want something to really freak you out. So
I've always been like interested in trying it, but I'm like, wait, I don't like horror at all.
Again,
and then
there's a lot of comfort to it, so I think you could enjoy that parts of it. Just there might be a spot where you just might want to stop, but then you might not want to know what happens. So
it's like vaguely similar enough to Undertale where I'll probably enjoy it anyways. So.
Yeah, I would say that I think Undertale had some kind of creepy bits, especially when you explore the spooky like abandoned lab. But Amori gets into the very psychological horror, like disturbing horror, especially because you could believe that some of the events that happened actually happened because it's very plausible. So it'll stick with you for a bit.
I played To the Moon, it's fine.
See, whenever I looked at Amori, just based on like first impressions alone, I was like, well, clearly this is just like a nice fun game with like silly things that happen and in like an RPG space. And then I kind of dug into it more, and I was like, oh my god, this is a really traumatic story.
Oh gosh, it's so upsetting, but God, it's such a really gripping story, and some of the just horrible, horrific endings are amazing. I love them. There's one that has a really good rendition of My Time by Bo-En, which is kind of a banger of a song, and it actually, like, the bad ending is like, oh, what have I done? But then you kind of like start shaking your head to the song. It's like, oh, that was cool. So great experience, but be warned, because this is a very adult story, so definitely play at your own discretion.
It does seem pretty similar to the Moon, which is like a very old game at this point, but just kind of that like very trauma-inducing story, but like it's worth it in the end,
All right, I've yet to play that, but I have heard of it. I think Laura Shigara sang a song of that. I know because she developed a game called Mr. Seitao that I played recently. But
she also worked on the Deltarune soundtrack.
Right, yeah, she sang the very end song. Don't Forget. I know because I learned that song on piano. So
me too.
All right.
But she did that, and that was insanely cool for me because I played To the Moon like 8 years before Deltarune. So it was very cool to hear that. But yeah.
I would also bring up as well, like if you're into those RPG maker games, there's a game that I came across a little while ago, and it's I think it's pretty old, like maybe 5 years old. And it's called Grimm's Hollow. It's a game that is completely free to play. The developer just kind of put it out there and said, you know what, you guys have it, it's yours, play it, enjoy it. And it's very similar to the likes of Undertale in the way that it goes about doing things. And it kind of has a story that reminded me a lot of kind of Terry Pratchett's Mort, where you're kind of like the understudy to the Grim Reaper, but it's a little bit darker and a little bit more forced on that end in Grimm's Hollow. But it's a very interesting one as well to check out if you like that sort of thing. And it is a little bit spippy.
Excellent. I know you recommended it to me earlier, Callum, but I'm going to check it out for October. That sounds like it's really up my alley.
Yeah, it just looked down and I was like, that's JT all over that one.
Yeah.
Any RPG maker, I'm like, that's JT. Yeah. Oh, I've kind of lost the run of myself. Was it me?
I think it was me.
Oh,
yes.
there you go.
Because
Yes,
JT went with Omori, and then we got very
yeah,
off
that's
track.
right. That's right. There you go.
But my next suggestion is Wild. I don't think either of you would have ever seen this coming. Cookie Clicker.
Wait, what?
It gets a really long time to get going, but if you dedicate like a week to it, it'll get to this weird, like, I don't know how to describe it. It's this like trippy horror type game where everything's like an eldritch abomination, and it started with you clicking on cookies, and it's actually insane. It's like everyone's played it, but no one thinks about it anymore, but it got updated recently. It's really cool.
Okay, so like if you like get to the latter stages, the game starts to kind of fall apart and it kind of reveals its true self. Is that the sort of vibe?
Yeah, pretty much. It just becomes like this eldritch horror type game aesthetic, and it's like it's still the same idle game type thing where you're just clicking on cookies and getting upgrades and stuff, but like now you got blood instead of milk, and like demonic portals are opening up. And it just slowly unravels into a scarier game.
I had no idea it becomes that. That actually sounds really great.
It is really cool. If you just want to like just have it open on your computer for like a week, then I definitely recommend it. It's a very satisfying progression despite being an idle game.
There you go. I mean, we can't add much more to that because it's Cookie Clicker, but there you go. It's horror. Yeah, I can't say I've gave any time to any sort of idle games that I can think of anyway.
I always do the thing where I will skip time forward on my computer. Like, I'll skip ahead 10 years, so I don't have to actually deal with any of the grinding or spend money. So, and then the game kind of knows that, says, hey, you're cheating, right? I was like, yeah, I know. It's like, bro, but our game was like, what? I don't want to wait, like, actual physical time. I want to get to the good stuff.
Cookie Clicker barely has anything that actually changes with your system clock, so you do kind of have to work for it.
Okay.
Well, there you go. If you want to jump back into Cookie Clicker, then you absolutely can. There's a reason now.
I mean, the reason was that it got updated recently, and also C418 did the soundtrack, and it's amazing, and no one talks about it.
Oh.
And he's the one that did most of the original Minecraft songs.
Right.
So
Okay. I was thinking that was like,
they're very good.
I think that's the same thing, but I don't know. It's like that sequence of letters. I don't.
Yeah, no, that's the same.
Okay.
Well, there you go. I'll jump in with another one. So this is one that I also reviewed in around March time, probably right after Killer Frequency, and that was Bramble the Mountain King, which is one of, do you know what? I'm going to bundle these together as a 3 because they are so similar. I'm also going to mention Inside, and I'm also going to mention Little Nightmares because they are all very, very similar. So Bramble the Mountain King is a game that plays very much like the other two. The main kind of twist of this one is that it's kind of based around Grimm's fairy tales, and it all starts off very picturesque and beautiful. You're wandering through the forest, and there's mushroom caps, and there's lovely foliage, and you're just kind of living out this fairy tale fantasy. And as all Grimm's fairy tales do, it descends into this dark, awful madness, and your character, who's just like a little kind of picture Hansel and Gretel, that's the kind of vibe. And you play as one of the two, and you essentially descend into madness as you have to kind of face up against these horrors that really shouldn't be there in this lovely setting, and you end up fighting these really well, not even intricate, but really scary set piece bosses, similar to Little Nightmares, but they're very much more set piece rather than an actual boss you have to fight. And They're very, very well done. There's one particular one where you're wandering around kind of the perimeter of a pond, and there's this like kind of pond lady, and you don't really know anything's going wrong. It's also very picturesque, and then this like swamp demon just emerges from nowhere and attacks you. And it's horrifying. It's genuinely horrifying. So if you want one that starts off really nice and kind of tumbles down into this awful spiral of like depression and darkness, and it's very good. And I don't think it got as much praise as it should have done whenever it did release, because like it was a technical marvel in terms of like it's very hard to actually put together those games, because aside from Little Nightmares, aside from Inside and Limbo, you don't really see them very often, and they've done a really good job. So that's definitely one to check out. Then to move on to Inside. Inside is very, very similar, but it's set in this kind of dystopian world where you are playing as a little kid that's escaped from a facility, let's say, and you're trying to basically keep your head down and get out of this horrible place that you find yourself in. And a lot of the story is just told through the environment. So you know that there's this kind of mind control thing going on. You know that there's some kind of entity that's trying to control the masses, and it's very 1984 in a lot of ways, and you're just trying to get from A to B. And it's kind of a 2D puzzle platformer for the most part, but there are so many fun set pieces in there that really bring the game to life. And they're the same people that made Limbo. So if you want Limbo, but with about 5 to 6 years of time to develop the ideas and make it even better, Inside is probably the better of the two. I love Limbo as well, but I have to say Inside is definitely a step up. And then lastly, Little Nightmares is a game that is a little bit different to Inside, but relatively similar. You have a little bit more depth in terms of the platforming and where you can explore. So you're not on a 2D plane. You can explore the environment kind of backwards and forwards too. And you're in this world where you're this little person in amongst all these horrifying, gluttonous monsters and monstrosities, and you are essentially just trying to escape, same sort of thing. But the real selling point of Little Nightmares is absolutely the monsters that you encounter. So you'll go through, if I speak about the first one, because it's the oldest, so spoilers are less horrible if I do them. You encounter like this chef who is essentially just cutting up all of these big meaty items, and he's got these big fat fingers, and he just looks horrible. And then you've got this librarian type that's very slender and has all of these really gangly limbs, and he just reaches up into the shelf that's like 3 times taller than him and just gets a book down, and he reaches to get you, and like, there's just so many unsettling things that happen in Little Nightmares, and it's all based around these horrible people or monsters that you meet. So I don't know which one I would recommend highest. I would probably say of the 3, Inside is definitely the technically strongest, but I think Little Nightmares is the best of the 3 personally.
Yeah, they're very creepy games. And the ending of Inside is really cool too, because they become something kind of different by the end without spoiling it. It's like, oh wow, this is like takes up a whole new, like the game just feels like it's a different game at that point. It's very violent.
Yeah, I remember getting to like the ending, like literally the end screen. And I was like, oh.
We made it.
Yeah, I always see those games, and especially on lists of like the like best like indie games in general, and it's like I just don't tolerate horror that well, so I've never tried them. But
No,
I've always wanted to.
I would say that Little Nightmares is probably a little bit too spooky for someone that doesn't do horror well, but I would say Inside is probably fine.
Yeah.
All right.
I say the one grudge monster, like the girl that follows you with the long flowing hair, like under the water,
Yeah.
that freaked me out a little bit. Seems like, oh, no. Stay away.
Yeah, there are moments, but it's definitely much more tolerable. Like Little Nightmares, those monsters get in your head. Like that is spooky stuff. But yeah, I've kind of done 3 in one go. So JT, take over.
Okay. I actually want to change it up for me a little bit. There's definitely many good spooky games, but I do want to give a mention to Monster Prom, which is more of a Halloween themed game than a spooky game. It's a dating sim, a joke dating sim, where you play as a monster high school in a high school of just all monsters. Like there's Frankenstein people, ghosts. There's giant eldritch people that are like everyone is like very characterized, and it's very much like everyone's like very much in high school, and they're acting very I don't know, like they're teenagers and stuff, but they're all monsters too. And you're playing as one of them that's trying to get a date for prom, and it's really funny, and I had a great time with it where I played it with some voice actors, and we were all like voice acting the monsters, and it was a really good time. Like there's a evil Little Mermaid who runs an authoritarian regime, followed by a friendly fish that secretly tries to get you to start a communist revolution. So there's all these like fun character tidbits, and all of the characters are kind of unredeemable. Like everyone's really horrible, or like equally horrible in some situations, but just trying to find ways to like romance them or seduce them is just hilarious. So I had some there's a lot of fun to be had with that if you like those kind of Sims. But yeah, because it's Halloween themed, I think it's a great game to mention. But it is very adult humor though. Like some of the jokes are kind of on the nose, like it's kind of pushing it. But
Yeah, I've seen bits of it, and I've kind of flirted with the idea of maybe giving it a try, but then I think to myself, it's basically like a glorified waifu dating sim, isn't it?
pretty much. But I guess there isn't as much fan service. It's more just a lot of jokes and humor mixed into there. But yeah, I guess in that context, I could definitely see it as that. I think it's great if you play with a group of friends where, like we had 4 groups going on, and only one of the groups was successful. The rest of us, weren't able to get a prom, and subsequently our lives were ruined by it. Like we lived in the sewers, or we never got a date again for the rest of our lives, and we were all sad and miserable. It was very well set up, and the execution was very good. But it is very long, and it is like a visual novel, so you do have to be very patient with it. But again, great game for Halloween if you're looking for something that's not spooky but is themed or in that setting.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Monica.
So my next suggestion's more so if you're like someone who often does like big groups for Halloween parties and stuff, and that's several different Jackbox party packs because they have really good Halloween and like spooky themed games. Specifically, Trivia Murder Party, which is like a trivia game where like you are in like this horror mansion and there's an insanely scary narrator who's threatening to kill you the whole time, and then you do mini games to try and escape as well. And I'd say specifically Party Pack 6 because it has that, and also Push the Button, which is basically Among Us, but before Among Us was cool, and also a little more intense. And then also there's like in Jackbox Party Pack 4, there's Monster Seeking Monster, which is just like a game where you like text each other, try to like match up with each other in this fictional world where you're all playing as different like horror movie monsters, and they're both really cool. And if you have like a Halloween party going on, you could absolutely have that on both for the fun and the vibes.
Yeah. Oh, I always love the one where you're like trapped by the serial killer and you have to answer just those questions, and just like the theme around it is great. It really is just random trivia, but it's a lot of fun.
It's a lot more intense than a normal trivia game, and also like gives you the chance to catch up if you don't know trivia because there's the mini games as well.
Yeah.
And that's just a very good balance because I don't know trivia.
Oh,
Nice.
I love we had a situation where we all kept dying, and like we entered our 5th or 6th round, and it had a different like starting screen for it where it mentioned how bad we were at the game, and it's like, oh, well, now I feel embarrassed.
There's a weirdly insane amount of depth to Trivia Murder Party. There's like different endings and like a bunch of different lines of dialogue, and like one of the mini games is just Quiplash, which is an entirely separate Jackbox game. And it's like that's a lot of depth for one game. And it's really cool.
I wish I could engage with this more, but I don't think I bought a Jackbox party pack since like 2 or 3, so I'm really out of the loop.
Oh.
We should just do it on the Discord sometime.
Yeah, that's a great idea, actually. Just because you only need one person to own it, and then everyone else can just play on the internet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I will just full disclosure. If there's any opportunity in like a game like Drawful to draw a dick, I will draw a dick. It will happen because that's
Yeah,
humor. That's humor.
Thanks
that
for
was
letting
like
us know, Cal.
I remember looking through like because I recorded video Jackbox Party 10 for my review to take screenshots of because I didn't want to be like awkwardly screenshotting in the middle of the game, and like uh, all the rounds of like fixie text were like I could barely find a screenshot that I could put on the website. It just got so unhinged so fast.
That's the best way. Not
Yeah.
for a review, but well, yeah, I've only got one more, so I'll jump in. The last one I had written down was a Metroidvania game called Carrion. So essentially, that is a game where you play as this kind of I would refer to Spider-Man just to give you like visual context, like a symbiote monster where you break out of this lab. And it gave me real like Spider-Man if Carnage vibes. If you're like into Spider-Man, you know what Carnage is, but that character never really gets any sort of media time in like the big scale media, but it's a cool ass character. So basically, you play as this monster and you go through the facility. And in most Metroidvanias, you have this like really intense hard combat where you have to like manage platforming, but also kill the people that are there. With this one, you are just immediately overpowered from the start, and you just are able to kill consistently, and you only get more proficient as time goes on. There are certain sections where you have to go like, okay, I am outnumbered here, I am only a little ball of goo, but once you turn into a big ball of goo, you can do pretty much anything. And it's pretty terrifying because you are essentially the antagonist and the villain the entire time, and your end goal when you get out, you're loose on the city and you can wreak havoc on everyone. So you kind of feel like a bit guilty at the end, like, oh, I've ruined humanity. What a problem. But it's one of the Metroidvanias I've actually enjoyed because, as I've said many times, I have a very strained relationship with them. I don't like navigating them, and generally I'm not a big fan, but I like that one.
That's kind of
I just
interesting.
think
I actually had a really hard time with that game where I got so frustrated because I got lost and I couldn't figure out where to go. And I spent actually like an hour or two trying to figure out. I probably should have just looked up a guide at that point, but I was too prideful. But I actually didn't like it quite as much just because I got lost. But it was a very cool setting for just like I think it was a cool premise and it's a great like spooky kind of Metroidvania to play if you're looking for like a evil one. But yeah, it's funny because I just didn't like that one as much. So it's kind of interesting that you picked that there, Callum.
Yeah, see,
I just
I like
think
Metroidvanias that aren't Metroidvanias.
I just think that one looks really cool, and I've never played it, but like I think I've said that a lot this time, but I need to play more video games. But that one always just stood out to me. It just looked really cool. Just getting to actually play as the like monster in like a horror setting is just a really cool twist on the concept that somehow you don't see that much.
Yeah.
No, you see it in like horror PvP where you can play as like the enemy against the survivor, but that's the only other time you really see it.
Yeah.
Right.
I just think we should stop naming Metroidvanias as Metroidvanias and come up with an original name for it.
Nah, it's
That and
stuck now.
Soulborn.
I think it's too
Why do we name
ingrained.
them after two different games in the genre?
What would you call it? Like a horror or hollow.
E
Hollow
collection
Knight or
game. I don't know.
We'll work on it. We'll workshop it. We'll get something together.
Need a not copyright infringing name for that genre.
Yeah. JT.
yeah. All right. So would Soma count as an indie game? Because I know Frictional Studios is kind of.
I mean, they only make Amnesia, so I would say so.
Yeah. Well, I would say Soma then, which is a how to describe it? It's a spooky sim where set at like the bottom of the ocean that kind of revolves around finding out who you are and saving the last remnant of humanity. It kind of spoils it for a lot of you, sorry, but it's been out forever, so I don't care. But
I mean, that's a very loose way to describe the story. It's a lot. There's a lot more to it than
oh
that.
yeah, and the game it's very much the same kind of Amnesia style game where like you hide from monsters, but the real horror of it comes from a lot of the horrific things you do to get through the story, where a lot of it becomes like boils down to like, okay, what makes a person? Because you're essentially you find out later you're playing as a robot, and then So are you a person then? And then you're subjecting all of these consciousnesses to these horrific fates, like you're electrocuting this one robot that thinks it's a person to get to the next area, or you're putting the simulated person into a simulation to find out like the code to this next area. And I watched a really good critic go through it and say like you're basically summoning this person's soul back to the world, and you're like torturing them again and again, and you're killing them. And I was just so like it's a game that really makes you think about, humanity or like personhood, and like if you say like okay I am a person, then you have to say that all these beings that you've been tormenting are people too, and it like really makes you come to grip with your actions, and it's very well done. It's the horror hiding from monsters isn't so great, but the setting is phenomenal, and it's very much like BioShock, but there isn't any combat. You're just exploring a ruined city like while the world is destroyed and trying to save like just not even really humanity, just like the memory of humanity, which is kind of nice, but it's also very I don't know, you finish the game, you're very upset or like just horrified of what you've done.
It's definitely one of those games that makes you think about what existence actually is, and I don't know if a video game needs to do that. But
It's
Man,
does it very
Outer
well.
Wilds-
Makes you do it while you're like just subjecting these people to these horrible fates. It's like, well, maybe I should stop.
yeah.
This isn't worth it.
I was also going to say that like the one aspect of the game that isn't great is like hiding from the monsters and the kind
Yeah.
of stealth aspects of it. It kind of gets in the way, but you can actually turn that off. I think they updated it so that you can get rid of
Oh.
that. So it's just the setting. So if that was going to kind of draw you away from it, you can get rid of that.
Yeah, I recommend doing just that. I think a lot of people get into those games for the amnesia style hiding from monsters, having to like trick the AI. But for those parts, it feels like it's just padding. You're just kind of wasting time until you get to the next section, because a lot of the story sections are really good. Like I really haven't seen anything like it that's made question humanity in a while. But you'll
Yeah.
know if it's your cup of tea. If
I've
you like
played
those
enough.
sections.
I've played enough indie horror games to never want to find batteries for a flashlight ever again. So.
Oh gosh, it's that's the worst. It's like, oh no, I'm just in the dark. I can't see. What do I do? And then you hear the monster chasing after you. It's like, no.
Yeah, that just kind of leads me to being paralyzed. Just like, nope, I'm done. I'm dead. Oh well, hands up.
Yeah, I remember as a kid, I would like run towards the monster because like the suspense of waiting for the monster to get me was just too much. It's like, nope, I can't take it. I
Yeah.
just throw myself at it.
It's kind of akin to me and Elle have described or had a discussion about if there was ever a zombie apocalypse. She says, I wouldn't participate. I'd shoot myself in the head. I'm not doing that. And I'm like, yeah, I get it.
That's fair. It's like, oh, I don't want to do this. I'm out.
Just not participate.
I don't know if
Just
it's my
pop out.
arrogance.
I like that.
I don't know if it's my arrogance, but I just want to see how far I would get. But yeah, Monica.
So I have one that's a little weird, but I think you'll understand if you grew up with the game. And it'll be like a nostalgic feeling that'll feel a little weird, but also just kind of a little scary if you let yourself get into it. And that's old version of Minecraft on low render distance. And like
All right.
everyone owns Minecraft. That's like the most bought game in the world. And like it's just a weirdly somehow both serene and calming experience that is also terrifying because you can't see more than like 1 foot in front of you. And
Oh.
if you grew up with the game, it'll just also feel weird because you're experiencing the nostalgic version of the game that you grew up with. And I personally, for me, that's like beta 1.7, but for others, it might be like 1.2 or whatever. And on Java,
Yeah.
you can just choose whichever version you want, which is cool.
Yeah, well, I'm old enough to remember Minecraft whenever it was a web browser game. So
You just go all the way down to alpha. It's fine.
Yeah.
yeah, I can definitely get like with like all the low textures and wandering around under the floor trying to get diamonds and discovering that you're not alone. That could be a problem.
Yeah.
It's like even nowadays when I know so much about Minecraft and that like nothing in it will particularly shock me anymore, it's just like it's still so weird going back to an old version and just going back to what it would look like on my garbage laptop from back then. And like it's kind of a cool experience, and I recommend trying it again if you haven't in like years.
It's one of those rare games where like if you take it to its lowest kind of potato qualities, it looks great, and if you take it to like the 4K ray tracing mods that they've done for it, it also looks great. It goes both ways.
I kind of hate how shaders look, but that's a me thing.
I remember I had some moments where like I was just like mining diamonds by some lava, and then I turn around and see a creeper behind me and freak out. I'm like, no, no, all of my progress, all of my stuff.
Yeah,
You get that experience all the time.
There's some games where you have like little pockets, like they're not scary at all, but like you just kind of turn around from what you were doing. You're like, there's something up in your face. That happened to me all the time in Fallout with Deathclaws, and I would turn around like, oh
yeah.
Oh, here, hello. Yeah. I do have another one written down. I wasn't going to say it because I don't know if it's strictly like Halloween, but I'll say it anyway to keep the rotation going. I've got The Binding of Isaac down, and I think it's a horror game in the sense that I know it's got a lot of religious connotations, but in the sense that you're delving down into the depths and it's very demonic. And there's a lot of like satanic vibes too. I think it definitely belongs in the horror genre. For those that somehow haven't heard of The Binding of Isaac, it's kind of like a roguelike Zelda-esque dungeon crawler sort of thing where you use your tears as Isaac, who is like a child that's running away from their super religious mother that wants to sacrifice them. You use your tears as like bullets to kill the monsters, and you gather items so that you can upgrade your tear bullets and get all of these weird mutations and demonic kind of apparel for yourself. And it's a very good game, and it's one of those where you can kind of just play it in 15-minute spurts, and if you die, you die. If you don't and you go on a really good run for an hour, you feel pretty good about yourself. But it's good for those kind of short sessions if you don't want to commit like loads of time. And it's one of those endless games where you can pick up and keep playing it, and it never really gets old. Plus there are like new versions of the game, like I forget the name of the newest one, but there is a new one. I've not played it.
Plus,
Afterbirth. Yeah, and there might be an even newer one. I'm not sure, but there are more ones to kind of jump into because I think Edmund McMillan really doesn't want to stop making Binding of Isaac games, as happens with a lot of indie developers, like the Terraria developer that just doesn't want to stop making Terraria. It happens to the best of them.
Yeah, they'll never stop. But don't worry, guys. This is the final update.
Sure,
it's the last one.
I trust you.
It's like the 10th final update.
Yeah, I just picture Eric Barone making Stardew Valley updates, and it's like 2040, and he's like, "100 Chocolatier will come soon, guys."
Whatever Relogic is doing next, we don't know. The last update they had on something that wasn't Terraria was like, "Yeah, guys, we're learning Unity now." See how that went.
Gosh, I spent way too much time on The Binding of Isaac. I love it, but I was like hundreds upon hundreds of hours into that game. Also the story stuff is really good and upsetting. Like I found out what it was and it showed me the story, and like I genuinely teared up a bit. I was like, oh, that's really sad. And then they like the new update gave like a good ending to the game, which was like it felt really good. And it was just like they made it like, yeah, this is just fan service, but I appreciated it. And God, the depth for the roguelike is just nauseating. Like I don't think there's been more depth for a single roguelike that I've ever seen. It is so much.
Yeah, just keep tacking stuff on and tacking stuff on. But that's a sign of a good game,
yeah.
Or at least a good developer.
I still need to play it. I don't know how there's so many games I haven't played.
Yeah, we're mentioning a lot of ones, like big name ones.
I'm like, yeah, I should get that sometime.
Yeah.
My girlfriend played that one a lot, though, so maybe she'll just get me to do that one day.
Yeah, you're too deep in the trenches playing like indies.
And Terraria, that one too.
Well, that too, yeah.
Hey, I played Risk of Rain too. That's my quota for like bigger indies of the year. That's the only one I need.
Well, there you go, JT.
All right, my last one I have to pick. It's kind of, I don't hope it's not a cop out, but Doki Doki Literature Club. I've actually been talking about a lot of literature novels actually, but I think we all pretty much know what it is. But for those that don't know, it's a kind of fake literature novel that sets itself up as a romance one where you have to romance one of three girls that in a poetry literature club, and most of the game is picking choices and writing poems, and then one of the characters does something really awful to herself, and it kind of breaks the game, and it turns into a creepy pasta simulator at that point. And then it gets very crazy, and all the characters just kind of lose it by the end. But it has some kind of interesting bits where like you have to actually to end the game, you have to go into the game's files and delete characters or do something, and it's some of the horror felt kind of tacked on with just the creepy jump scares. Like, oh, but the build up to it is really good, and if you wanted to like try a dating sim that's very much not or just kind of a parody of it, it's great for it. But the setup to get there is also like it's good, but also it took a long time, like several hours of reading for me to get to that point. So it takes a while.
It's a genre that I don't really go near. I don't really know what it is, but I think I'm getting it mixed up with something else. Am I getting it mixed up with Danganronpa, which is
Yes.
is that the one with the teddy bear?
Yes, that's Danganronpa's
Okay.
the one. That's the mystery detective game, and then you battle people in like a Dance Dance Revolution style mini game.
Okay, very
And
different.
Doki Doki Literature Club is the one with the 3 creepy girls, or no, 4 creepy girls, and then there's just Monica, who's there. Oh, also you, Monica. Oh, right. I just thought about that.
I
Just
am
Monica.
unfortunately overtly familiar with that game because every
Yes.
time someone hears my name, they're like, "Oh, it'd be really funny and a joke you definitely haven't heard before if I just make a joke about you being Monica." And I'm like, "Shut up, stop! I don't want to hear it anymore." It's unrelated.
I'm so sorry to
It's
bring
not
that
even
up there.
still the same. Just don't want to hear that.
Well,
Like
yeah.
half the time someone starts a conversation with me, it starts with that joke, and I hate it.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
It is so dumb. I don't even dislike the game. I just dislike it for that.
That's fair.
Oh my gosh. Oh,
Well, why don't you distract yourself with telling us another game?
yes, please.
Okay. I didn't really have much else. So pretty much the only other one I really had to suggest is Hollow Knight, which isn't. It's mostly not a horror game except for Deep Nest.
Oh, the
Which
one
is
section with
very terrifying.
the fake Hollow Knight where you see yourself. That's
Yeah.
that's spooky.
All the bugs that are like looking like actual bugs and not like fake funny silly bugs.
Uh,
Yeah, that one. But that, and also it just kind of has the vibe of a game you play when you want like a darker, more like monotone color palette type game. And also, it's just a very good game.
yeah. Like some
Yeah.
comfort feels genuine, and then there's a bit where like Grubfather eats all of his children, and you're like,
Yeah.
I wasn't. I thought they were so cute and innocent. What have I done? And then you hear them inside of Grubfather, or some say like, oh, they're gonna emerge from Grubfather and they're gonna become like beautiful butterflies. It's like, wait, that's also horrific. Like that's But that overall the tone
Yeah.
of the game is really good. Like I agree with you. Like that is a great Halloween game.
Yeah, especially going just through Deep Nest and just like if you just want to chill out there for a minute to get your vibes going, there you go. I don't think chill out is the right word for it.
How about run frantically away
Yeah,
from everything?
that's like the first place in the game where enemies start dealing 2 masks of damage, and that's an insane jump scare in itself, even though that's not a jump scare.
Oh yeah.
Like, oh yeah, you're doing like most of my health now.
For me, it was the jellyfish ones in the Fog Canyon, where it's
Yeah.
like they would do the 2 mass damage, but yeah, they get very hard in that area. So I agree.
There you go. And that, ladies and gentlemen,
Well,
wraps up our section on the
wait,
best.
Callum,
Oh,
there's
we
one
got one
more.
more. There's one
Malika
more.
is.
Ooh.
Don't you
Oh,
remember
yes.
Costume
That's-
Quest 2?
Okay,
Yeah, the
so
game we're all so familiar with.
we are all intimately familiar with Costume Quest, and we've been told
Uh-huh.
by Malika that we have to mention it, and we were going to anyway, obviously. So I'm going
Yeah.
to not read her description of it. This is definitely not what I'm doing. It's about 2 trick-or-treaters who go on an adventure through time to stop an evil dentist who's trying to rid the world of Halloween candy.
Oh,
It's got
no.
fun turn-based combat, plenty of things to collect, and an exciting plot.
I love collecting things, and
Exciting plots.
The bit where you put on costumes was one of my favorites.
I
It really
We
feels
talked
on-
about this previously, and she brought it up and said, "I really love Costume Quest 2," and I'd never heard of it and I thought it was her bringing up one of her like mobile games that she brings along occasionally because she gets sucked into those because she is she is their target market. And I was like, "Oh, I've missed Costume Quest 1. How could I possibly talk about Costume Quest 2?" And then she got really offended, as if I'd really slandered her favorite game. So
Oh.
my bad.
I just don't think we know anything about it.
Well, listen, I love quests. I love costumes. The number 2 is great. I'm
Mhm.
sure it's great.
True.
I feel like
I
we've
played
covered
Risk of Rain
that.
2, not Risk of Rain 1. I feel like that counts. Don't know how. It just does.
It just does. I feel like we've covered that excellently. Well done, everyone.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Clap, clap.
Well, now I can call it a day. So, with that has been our big discussion on the best Halloween indies to play in 2023. Maybe we'll do it again next year if there's more. Of course, there will be. Duh. But just to wrap things up, did you know we have a website? It's called the Indie Game Culture website. We do news, reviews, we do all of that stuff. Go and check it out. Also, if you enjoyed this podcast and you want to hear more, we have a catalog of lovely episodes that you can check out. Monica's on another one, but Malika's on the rest. And then we also had a recent guest with Cozy Cat from the Cozy Gamer Cast, if you want to have a check with that one as well. And as well as that, we have a lovely Discord where you can come and join the conversation, talk about all of us and our brilliant ways and how we do things fantastically and give us lots of compliments. I'd like that. You could do that for me. That would be nice of you. And also we have Twitch. We are starting up our streams again. Monica is currently doing our Wednesday slot. So we are slowly but surely getting that back up and running. And as well as that, go and join our socials. They will be popping very soon as well. But until then, say goodbye, everybody.
Bye.
See everyone.
Bye.